Hey guys. This is what if Naruto was raised by Team Minato. Fate is a strange thing. Two whose fate was supposed to be death and insanity instead were given something new. Let's see how the world changes when Obito and Rin are around to help both their village and raise their sensei's son. Hit like and subscribe if you like this one, and also please check the author in the description. Let's start.
We are pain, that's all. We are God.
Chapter 1: Birth of a New Path. For every action there is an accompanying reaction. A timeline is a series of events that comprises a story. To alter one event could have drastic consequences on all events going forward, and even have some effects on events going back if the butterfly effect is taken into account for the lead up to the alteration. Or you could just have a few small, inconsequential happenings due to the newly induced changes. You never know really until you explore it, because those small inconsequential happenings could snowball into a catastrophe, or fizzle out anticlimatically. Our story takes place in the world of the shinobi, the world of Naruto, similar to the world that we all know. However, this world's history is drastically altered by a few events going differently. Obito's supposed death never occurring, but an event causing him to gain his Mangekyo nonetheless, is the one of the primary changes, occurring before the start. An altered mission that originally resulted in the death of Rin and Obito going insane as a result, is the second major change. There are smaller changes as well, changes done previous to our starting point, which itself an in medias residential, beginning with Rin coming to after being rescued after Sanbai implantation. Let's see how things go. Pain. That was all Rin could feel as the blackness the Kirinines had put her in while implanting the Sanbai into her receded. She could see three figures gathered around her, as she laid in a bed that was most likely in an inn. Her teacher Minato, as well as her teammates Hatake, Kakashi, and Uchiha Obito. Minato-sensei's presence was very odd because he was forced to separate from his students on short notice to execute a task pertinent to the current mission. She noticed that Kakashi had begun wearing his headband like a makeshift eye patch to keep his implanted Sharingan eye suppressed except for when he needed it. The story on how he got it involved stumbling across an Uchiha missing nin earlier in the mission. He was glad he decided to break the rules and extract the traitor's Sharingans in case they might be needed for implants, especially after he lost an eye during this mission they were currently on. Pragmatism at its finest. Obito looked as though he had been forced to watch someone die, and then seen them alive like nothing was wrong. Rin noticed a few peculiarities with Obito, who looked as though he had just gotten up from a pretty severe breakdown and a bad beating. The next oddest thing she noticed was his Sharingan, which he had on at the moment, like he was trying to make sure if what was in front of him. Obito had managed to activate his bloodline limit a few months ago on a C rank gone wrong. Before she had been abducted, Obito had two tomos in both Sharingans, but now it was something entirely different from the standard tomo symbols. They looked like a three-bladed propeller blade. Obito looked as though his entire world had been shaken by something, and Rin had heard of cases where an Uchiha's Sharingan would undergo mutations based on the proper stimulus. No one had figured out how or why, and no Uchiha was willing to be a testing dummy. Rin decided she could ask another day on what caused this mutation. Rin found her team to be a strange one, as the members of it were all orphaned. Minato-sensei had lost his parents shortly after becoming a genin. Kakashi lost his mother when she gave birth to him and lost his father when he committed seppuku to reclaim some honor he had lost. Obito's father died before he was born, while his mother died on a mission before his final year at the academy, and was helped by his aunt Mikoto when he needed something afterwards. Rin had lost her parents before she was even old enough to remember them. The only reason she knew her family name was Nora was because one of the caretakers at the orphanage she grew up in had been familiar with her parents. Once Rin and Obito reached through to Kakashi and helped him to start breaking free of his obsession with following the rules as a result of his father's suicide due to the shame of breaking them to save a comrade at the cost of failing the mission, a bond had begun to tie the three together. They would have their arguments and disagreements, but all of that would pass as their family of choice continued to keep on moving forward. Before the new Sanbai Jinchuriki could continue her thoughts, her hearing decided to snap to work, and she heard, "You're awake, good. We thought we were gonna lose you for a while there." The ever-reassuring voice of Namikaze Minato relaxing her mild panic at sound suddenly being heard again. Before she could ask anything, Minato began to explain that to Rin that they were able to save her from the Miss Nines, but they were unable to get there in time. As a result, Rin was the newest Jinchuriki of the Sanbai, the three-tailed turtle. However, before she could begin contemplating her life, Minato began to explain some of the ups and downs that came with being a Jinchuriki, as well as the fact that he replaced the intentionally faulty Biju containment seal on her with one that would properly work. Rin was thinking about everything and came to a conclusion. Though the events that granted her this was tragic, she was not going to allow it to consume her. She was going to take this turn of events and make the power she had been so graciously given by Kiri into her own, like the other Jinchurikis she had heard of, who received the power from their villages when they were much younger than her 14 years old. The ninjas who had forged themselves into legends like the Magma Monkey Sage Rashi, the Red Steam Fortress Han, and most infamously, Killer B of Kumo's most recent A and B tag team. She was not letting go of her dream to be a medic nin, even though she would have to put a lot more effort into controlled training. In fact, it just made an alteration to that dream, to be the first Jinchuriki capable of being a focused medical ninja. Once they knew she was well enough to travel, the group set out for the Hidden Leaf. But along the way a voice had begun to make itself known within the young Kunoichi's head. Perhaps you might be a better host than my previous one, young one. I have to be going crazy. I could have sworn I heard a voice in my head. I assure you, your sanity is as strong as ever. It is just the shock of hearing my voice for the first time. How can I be considered sane and normal if I'm hearing voices? I said you were sane, not normal. Fair enough. But how long have you been in my mind? I haven't been in your head long, young one. I have only been here as long as the last month at the most. Even I'm not quite sure. My mind is a haze due to the sudden extraction and then implantation into your body. Within the last month? Wait a moment, you said you were implanted? With that one statement, realization dawned upon Rin as she realized who was implanted into her. You're the three-tailed turtle, Sanbai no Kame. It took you that long to figure out who I am? I believe it took you less time than most would take. You truly are an observational prodigy, and a great mind of this age. Truly, I have never seen another Jinchuriki with your observational prowess. Back off on the sarcasm. I'm trying to be nice, and it surprised me. I have had very little opportunity for personal enjoyment. I usually entertain myself by taking what you humans call pot shots at my Jinchurikis when they start hearing me. Whenever I hear about Biju, I always think about the stories about you being demons, nature's wrath made flesh, angry animals. But hearing you right now, you sound mellow and quite eloquent, even having a sense of humor beyond what is assigned to you, which is typical demonic sadism from folklore. Aren't you afraid that I'll try to force my way out of the seal and go on a rampage? I don't think I should really be afraid unless something awful happens while Kushina-sensei teaches me to control your chakra. Unless you actually are planning on breaking out to go on a rampage, are you? A mental silence ensued as the turtle let his thoughts gather at what his newest host had just said. I was just joking, being sarcastically hopeful when I said I hoped she could be different. Kurama is right about most humans being the same and unchanging, often for the worst. But one piece of wisdom that Son Goku shared with me is that the ones worth protecting are the ones who acknowledge us as being sentient beings rather than mindless monsters. And though there may be ages in between meeting one, oftentimes it makes protecting humanity as a whole worth it just to see another. After all this time, I finally found another who acknowledges me as such. Maybe things can be different with this girl. No, I'm not planning on forcing my way out. Then maybe we can be friends, if that's okay with you? You do realize that even if I'm not planning on trying to kill you by forcing my way out of the seal, we still are in a prisoner and the warden of their prison-style relationship? Because of that, it is unlikely that we will be reaching a true understanding until a few years down the line. I hope we can reach that agreement. I'd hate to be stuck with you while trapped in the sort of relationship that Kushina-sensei possessed with the fox. I know that the man leading you is called Minato, as my mind became aware of my new conditions before I began speaking to you, so I assume this Kushina is another of your teachers. Because unless there is an inside joke at play here, Kushina is a feminine name if I remember correctly. Though I can't help but marvel at the coincidence that I was implanted into a student of the Jinchuriki who contained one of my brothers. Wait. The fox is your brother? All of the Biju are siblings. Okay, did not expect to hear that. So in favor of trying to move this conversation along, do you mind expanding on that? No, it's something I don't like talking about. Fine, I can respect that. Do you have a name? Yes, but I only tell it to those I trust absolutely. Fine, but do you have something you would rather be called other than Three Tails, or Sanbai, or any variation on those two? No, you may call me whatever you want. But I do suggest you focus on the others, they are starting to get worried. Orion! A shout of her name startled her out of the near trance-like state she had been in ever since she started her conversation with the not-so-monstrous Senpai. She looked over to see a panicked Obito with a look of despair on his face that made him look much older than his 13-year-old face should. "Rin, are you alright?" asked Minato-sensei. "Yeah, I'm fine," Rin responded, trying to sound convincing enough. "Are you really?" the man asked again. Rin sighed. "No, the turtle started talking to me." Her teammate's eyes went wide and Obito asked, "You mean that you talked to the three tails?" "Yeah, I had a whole conversation with it," Rin answered. "And?" Minato asked, sensing that she hadn't said something she wanted to. "We already got a better relationship than Kushina-sensei and the fox," Rin said with a small smile on her face. Time skipped 2 years later, April 10th, hours before the delivery. Rin and her team had just returned from an A-ranked mission 2 days ago, just in time to get last-minute preparations for what was about to happen today. Much had changed in 2 years' time. The lessons from Kushina-sensei to Rin had allowed her to start training to actually control Senpai's power. Her medical prowess had begun to increase once she began learning how to take away the poisonous component of her Senpai-enhanced chakra during the conversion process to alter her chakra into healing chakra. Obito had changed a bit as well. Shortly after the mission, he severed his ties to the Uchiha clan, not out of hatred but out of irreconcilable differences between his principals and the vocal majority of the clan. Mikoto and Shursui had been the only ones to actually try to get him to reconsider his position, but whatever had happened during the mission had made him wary of his clan. His physical appearance and attire had also changed slightly, ditching his goggles and ear protectors entirely, and allowed his hair to grow out slightly. But all of that paled in comparison to the power he revealed to them that the mission had awakened, the Mangekyo Sharingan. The power by which Madara had legendarily been able to control the Kyuubi and use it to battle the first Hokage. The primary ability he had that made his unique compared to others was his possession of a space-time technique called Kamui, allowing him to phase parts, or the entirety of his body into a pocket dimension, allowing things to go through him like he was a ghost. The technique also allowed him to open up spatial holes to suck up anything in the near vicinity, including himself if he chose, and send it to the pocket dimension he had named the Kamui world. Minato had allowed him access to the research concerning the flying Raijin for the purposes of better developing Kamui. The eventual result had been Obito developing the Kamui marker with a few pointers, allowing him to target his warps towards to whatever held the seal. Kakashi had changed little, but his reputation had become legendary among the elemental nations as the copy ninja, master of 1000 jutsu that he had seen and copied with a Sharingan he had in his eye socket despite not being an Uchiha. He had also gained the moniker the Lightning Wolf, a title based on his family canine association and his mastery over the lightning release. He had developed a Chidori variant called the Chidori Current in an attempt to begin reverse engineering the effects of Kumo's lightning armor. The most recent result was a far more efficient version of his Chidori Current called the Lightning Cloak. All three had been taken into their teacher's home, easing some of the voids that some of the three orphans still possessed in their lives, keeping their strange family together and happy. All three had taken up learning Minato's Fuinjutsu arts, each one excelling at it in their own way. Obito had decided to make the area his niche among the group, pouring everything he was into learning how to do it, and do it well. Kushina gave him extra lessons to help him attain that goal. Recent events included the Jonin promotions of both Obito and Rin as well as Kushina's pregnancy, and she was due to give birth to a son tonight. Minato-sensei had become Hokage 3 months before Kushina became pregnant. Minato liked to be optimistic about the world and everyone in it, but something had happened before he became Hokage that made him weary to certain possibilities and start preparing for them. One of his acts had been to officially adopt his 3 students as members of the Uzumaki clan's Konoha branch, making them his children by adoption and the siblings to his and Kushina's son. He also had made a will with specific instructions that if anything happened to both him and Kushina, his students were to take custody of his son, having already been given his name, Uzumaki Naruto, after the main character in Minato's Sensei Jiraiya's novel The Tale of a Gutsy Ninja to honor his teacher, and given the boy his mother's clan name. The young Jonins had been given the status of legal guardians to Naruto should anything happen. They were made the executors of Minato and Kushina's estate as well with specific orders regarding it. He also planned ahead in case something happened to Kushina and he was forced to seal the Kyuubi inside Naruto, with orders to be carried out by whoever succeeded him following his death in the worst-case scenario, whether it be the newly appointed 5th Hokage or the 3rd Hokage retaking the hat, on penalty of death for disobeying the final order of the 4th Hokage. Apprehension stuck heavily in the minds of the three young shinobi as the clock's hands ticked towards the moment that their adoptive mother and teacher entered labor. What would this night bring? Will things be alright with the looming of the possible threat of the Kyuubi's freedom? Unfortunately, life is unfair. 5 hours later. Kakashi, Rin, grab onto me. We are going to have to try it, said Obito as he readied himself to make use of Kamui, one of his Mangekyo jutsus, using its warping capabilities to escape the guards left to prevent the young ninjas from joining the battle against Kyuubi. Kurenai and the others had begun to carry out a distraction to prevent the escorts from being able to stop the young jonins. Once everything was in place as Kakashi planned, he waited till the factors were perfect, before screaming, "Now!" at his best friend, who responded with the announcement, "Spiraling body flicker!" to throw them off to the real nature of Obito's teleportation method. Any Konoha Jonin who was aware of the Mangekyo's existence would also be aware of the fact that almost all techniques linked to it were named after a traditional god that usually could be linked to what the jutsu entailed. The vortex appeared from his eye and sucked the three into his Kamui world, a dimension that existed linked to his Kamui technique. Obito immediately made a hand seal and began sensing. Within the Kamui world, the real world was linked to the alternate dimension in a mirrored sort of way. A straight jump to the Kamui world would put Obito in a place that represented where he was jumping from, and should he make use of Kamui phasing, the parts of himself being phased into the Kamui world would be represented in the spot mirroring where he was phasing in the real world. He could jump to a specific part of the Kamui world under certain conditions, and he could jump directly to another location in the real world, but it required that he already be familiar with the location, or if he was using some form of sensing or marker detection to make a jump to. He found what he was looking for after a moment of searching: Minato-sensei's chakra as well as Kushina-sensei's chakra. Obito was inexperienced at detecting chakras due to the relatively recent discovery of Kamui warping, but he could definitely tell that Kushina's chakra was far weaker than it should be even though the fox was extracted. He was scared because of what experience with sensing he did have, especially with weakened chakras told him that she was hurt and hurt bad, possibly even dying or too late to be saved. Pushing those thoughts aside, he told his friends, "Get ready." Once he knew they were grabbing him, he molded the chakra to create the Kamui portal and the three were pulled through. A dull ache permeated Minato's entire body as he stood holding both Kushina and Naruto after teleporting the Kyuubi to the outside of his hideout where he left them. He could tell that Kushina was hurting very badly as a result of the extraction. Most likely she would die if she did not get intense medical treatment for the damage done to her chakra system. The moment he had to catch his breath and steel himself for what was about to happen, and what he had to do was given to him by the feedback the Kyuubi was suffering due to being forcibly teleported by the flying Raijin had left it dazed and unable to react. Before he could begin acting, a familiar sound occurred and from a distortion emerged from it was his three students. "Sensei!" Minato was shocked at his students being here after he told them to stay back. "What are you three doing?" Before Minato remembered his fight with the masked man who was able to control the fox with a Sharingan, presumably the Mangekyo Sharingan. Obito possessed the same dojutsu. Perhaps he could enact a form of control over the fox to buy time for what I have planned. "Never mind, Obito, I need you to switch to your Mangekyo and attempt to place the Kyuubi in a Sharingan Genjutsu. Don't ask why at the moment, I'll tell you in a moment. Rin, check on Kushina and see if you can stabilize her. Kakashi, keep sharp and make sure no one attempts to interfere." Obito did as he was told and began attempting to put the fox under a genjutsu with his Mangekyo. A few attempts at the task while the fox was making eye contact with him caused the monster to reel back and start roaring. When it stopped and opened its eyes, the slitted eyes of the creature was dilated before shrinking to reveal a Sharingan pattern in its eyes. Kakashi, Rin, and Obito were shocked at the development and the kitsune's sudden docility. "How?" Obito questioned while Minato finished summoning the sealing altar, before they began hearing Rin sobbing until she spoke understandable words. "I'm so sorry, Sensei, but there is nothing I can do. Her chakra system has deteriorated too far. She has maybe a few minutes left." Kakashi and Obito both looked at her with tear-filled eyes, while Kushina struggled to get up. "If that's all I have left, then I'd rather use them to help save my family and my village." She stiffly went through hand seals before forming her adamant and sealing chains to form a barrier and to assist in binding the fox for a sealing. Minato spoke up. "I need all of you over here. Rin, help Kushina get over here." All of them listened and obeyed. Obito got there first, to which Minato responded. "Obito, place the seal for the Kamui marker on Naruto." I'm gonna make a socket to go around the seal I'm going to place on Naruto to fully contain the fox within the type of seal I'm going to place. We're going to merge the formula for your marker into its architecture. Obito nodded and placed his hand on Naruto's stomach and molded chakra to create his Kamui marker, and once he was done, Minato placed his hand and channeled chakra to his son's stomach and to make the socket. Minato spoke again. Kushina, you and I are going to seal a part of our chakra into his seal as fail-safes. Mine to repair the seal should it be compromised, and yours to help him when he inevitably fight the Kyuubi for control of its power. If you have anything you want him to know when he meets you, think it as you're transferring the chakra. Kushina wanted to argue and tell him to seal it in her to allow Kushina to take the fox down with her to give them time to prepare to seal the fox when it returned, but the look he had told her it would not work anyways, and deep down she knew he was right. Obito asked. Sensei, how did you know that the hypnosis would work? Minato responded. The fox was extracted by a rogue Uchiha who claimed to be Madara. He put the fox under a genjutsu to control it, and summoned it within Konoha. I defeated him and severed his connection to the fox, but he is still alive and promised to be back. I guessed it would work after remembering your Mangekyo. After his explanation, the process of sealing their chakras was complete. Finally, I need you three to place your hands on the socket and sync your chakra with mine. It will make it so that your chakra, without irregularities present, can be used to open up the architecture and modify it should the need arise. The three students nodded and did as they were told. Minato began talking once they finished. Here comes both the hardest and easiest part. I have to use Shiki Fuin to seal the fox. I wouldn't have to use it if the Kyuubi wasn't uncontained. I have methods that could be used to transfer it. Shiki Fuin is the only sealing method I have that can drag the fox into the socket we created and seal it with the seal it will create. After the seal is created, I'll summon a scroll toad and place the key on it, have it go to Jiraiya Sensei. They wanted to argue, but they knew it wasn't an argument they could win. Rin spoke first. Goodbye, Sensei. Before hugging him, Obito and Kakashi joined in and told their own tearful goodbye. The Yondaime Hokage eventually pushed away to begin the sealing. He rushed through the hand seals and summoned the Shinigami, the god of death, once he finished. The Harvester of Souls moved its hand to Naruto, placing its hand on his stomach in the middle of the pre-prepared socket, pushing its hand in and sprouting out through the socket as well, and rushing to the fox and grabbing it and beginning to pull it into the seal. The cold presence of the Shinigami's touch caused Naruto to cry, and the ghastly force pulling it into the array snapped the fox out of the genjutsu controlling it. Within the depths of Rin's seal, the three tails sat in contemplation within its cell, happy to see his brother again through Rin's eyes, but saddened it was due to him being locked away again. It has been a while, Kurama. To the turtle's surprise, a voice answered back, Aisabu? It is you, isn't it? Indeed it has. But where am I? The last thing I remember is being extracted from that Uzumaki woman by that masked bastard. Wait, why is there a baby on that altar that looks like the sealing altar? No. I won't be imprisoned again. The turtle could only watch in horrified realization of what his brother planned on doing didn't do it. That child is innocent. None of this putrid, disgusting race that refuses to change is innocent. I will kill them all. The chains still binding the fox had weakened due to Kushina's declining state and her fractured chakra. With a mighty effort, the fox broke free and lunged its claw forward to kill the Uzumaki child they sought to seal him in. Minato and Kushina both rushed forward using their bodies to protect Naruto, impaling themselves to keep their son safe. Minato pulled the last of his chakra to summon the scroll toad Geratora, and placed the key to the seal on the scroll toad's unwrapped body. The toad wrapped the scroll that was part of it before vanishing to store himself within Jiraiya. And with that, the Kyuubi was pulled into the seal, and Namikaze Minato and Uzumaki Kushina passed from this world. Kushina passed to the pure world while Minato passed to the Shinigami's stomach, the two lovers separated for eternity most likely. All while their newborn son cried for his now dead parents. Rin picked him up and held him, trying to calm him. The moment she turned her back, the altar unsummoned itself. There. Nei-chan's here to take care of you. Naruto calmed down somewhat at that, while his new siblings moved to begin carrying out their sensei's final order to them. Conceal Naruto's Jinchuriki status from others to protect him from the harsh treatment he would inevitably be subjected to should that information be known, and from any of those who would seek to use said treatment to break him and turn him into their weapon. Their newest mission had begun. The last mission given to them by their sensei. They would not fail. No sooner than a minute after they left to establish the alibi they were told to give, the third Hokage Sarutobi Hiruzen and a group of jonins arrived at the remains of the hideout to discover the carnage, and the bloodied and broken bodies of Minato and Kushina. An hour later Hiruzen sat in the council chamber, reinstated as the Hokage in the wake of Minato's death. The matter at hand was the rogue actions of his 3 students that had escaped from the area they had kept the young ninjas. They had returned 4 minutes ago, carrying a baby who was Minato and Kushina's son. That they only revealed that to Hiruzen, a scroll containing Minato's final orders to Konoha, and finally a storage scroll they claimed contained some things they would want to see. The words of the letter it was contained in somewhat displeased Hiruzen on what he wanted to do after he was told of the Nine Tails' newest Jinchuriki. It placed a total gag order on any information regarding the existence of the newest Nine Tails Jinchuriki, under penalty of death in any situation should the Hokage release the information in any way besides key exceptions that could not be manufactured or engineered. Hiruzen wanted to tell the public of Konoha that it was safe from the Nine Tails because it was imprisoned inside a child, but the order had forbidden it. It also extended the gag order to any Jinchuriki that Konoha was forced to create afterwards and to any they took in from other villages. But distressingly it gave confirmation that key members of both ANBU and the Hokage Guard platoon had been given orders to kill the sitting Hokage should this order be violated, with only Rin, Obito, or Kakashi having the authority to overturn the order. "What is in the storage scroll?" he asked them. Obito unsealed the contents, and quite a few gasped in shock, the dead bodies of multiple ANBU as well as Sarutobi Biwako, Hiruzen's wife. "What is the meaning of this?" cried one of the clan heads. Kakashi responded. "We escaped from the guards to find the place where Kushina was giving birth. When we arrived we found all these dead bodies along with little Naruto there crying his eyes out and 2 scrolls, one for us and us alone and then one for you Hokage-sama and Hokage-sama alone." Hiruzen nodded. Before he could respond, Danzo cut in. "I find it hard to believe that Kushina would leave the care of her child, the last known Uzumaki, to 3 15-year-olds, especially an Uchiha miscreant. I move to have custody of Naruto removed from them and placed with someone else, perhaps Ari Sito." Hiruzen sighed mentally, thinking to himself, "I know better than to trust you on that, Danzo. Ari-sen was the public identity of Ant, one of your highest and most loyal subordinates en route before I ordered it disbanded before the end of my previous term. Danzo, your motion is denied, and if you suggest or try to pull it again, you will be dismissed from any position you hold." Danzo frowned but nodded. Obito looked extremely angry and offended, before calming down and downing a predatory smirk. "I find it strange that you directly mentioned that one of the reasons you wanted Kushina's will overturned was because I'm an Uchiha. I wonder why you would mention that in particular. I wonder if it has anything to do with the fact that your inferiority complex tells you that even if Tobirama-sama didn't choose Hiruzen-sama to be the Sandaime, my relative and Shursui's great-grandfather Uchiha Kagame would have most likely been his next choice before you despite his hatred and distrust of the Uchiha. A hatred and distrust you not only inherited but have taken to such extremes that you know even Tobirama-sama would disapprove of." The council went quiet as crypt. Everyone's eyes went wide as they slowly turned to Danzo to see the normally stoic elder burning with rage with an expression on his face that screamed that Obito was right in his accusations and had nailed Danzo completely. Before the cripple could respond, he was cut off by Hiruzen. "Shimura Danzo, respond to Obito and you're finished." Danzo grit his teeth and snarled. "As you wish, Hokage-sama." Before anyone else could cut in, Rin spoke. "Hokage-sama, could we be excused? We have things to take care of, especially this little one." Hiruzen nodded and added, "You may, if anyone has any other business, it can wait till an early morning session tomorrow." Everyone nodded and began leaving. Hyuga Hayashi left his chair and began to make his way to his compound to check on his wife Hitomi, who was pregnant with their first child, and to regretfully inform her of their friends Minato and Kushina's passing, along with the good news of their son's survival. As he left the door, the voice of an old friend called out to him. "Hayashi." Hayashi turned to see Uchiha Fugaku walking over to him. "Fugaku." Hayashi responded, acknowledging the old friend. Fugaku responded, "I hope your clan didn't suffer any heavy losses. Mine suffered some minor losses when the fox first appeared, and everyone else went to helping with the evacuation effort." Hayashi nodded before responding. "Mine had a similar situation. I'm just thankful Hitomi wasn't harmed." Fugaku nodded. "I'm thankful that I don't have to tell Mikoto that 2 of her dearest friends passed away on the same night." Hayashi nodded before saying something else. "I never knew young Obito could be that vicious." The few times I had actually had extended contact with him, he almost seemed to be a different person. Fugaku nodded before grinning. I always wondered why Makoto was always so fond of Obito. I never knew he could be that way. He used to boast about wanting to be the first Uchiha Hokage, and I couldn't help but think what an embarrassment he would be. But after tonight I think he would do the job just fine. Hayashi nodded before he went to end the conversation. I'm sorry, old friend, but I must end this here. Fugaku nodded before responding. I must as well. See you tomorrow. Danzo left plotting how to take control of Naruto and get a war to gain Jinchuriki to strengthen themselves against the loss they just incurred. Perhaps Kuma would be a worthy pawn. They have always desired an Uzumaki to breed. Perhaps they will take the bait. I'll get a war with them and the last Uzumaki for when the fox returns, and to breed a new Uzumaki clan for my purposes once he is old enough. Chapter 2: The Encroaching Storm Clouds. 2.5 weeks after the Kyuubi attack, Rin had been exhausted ever since the attack. Dealing with the heartache of losing both her father and mother figures had been the first battle she had to deal with. She felt bad for Obito and Kakashi, who were suffering from the same heartache. But at the same time she was thankful to whatever God there was that they had each other to help themselves through it. Rin shuddered when she thought about what could have happened to them individually without each other to help support them through it, especially Kakashi. This was the second time he lost his father figure, and the first time he lost his mother figure. She could imagine what would become of him, as though her mind was able to peel back the fabric of reality and see the parallel world where the possibility had happened. She saw him as a broken shell of a man, with a suicidal desire but no will to end it by his own hand, instead seeking out the most dangerous missions to have others do it for him and failing because he always put the most into his missions. She knew he had some unsavory habits he indulged in private, but this shell she could see had become so broken as to not care if the world saw him reading Jiraiya's smut books in public. Unmotivated. Only waking up each day out of habit. She put away that train of thought for another day, hopefully never to be recontinued and permanently forgotten. The other half of the battle was taking care of Naruto. The little guy could eat so much it was a wonder he wasn't getting overweight even with his Jinchuriki status. He was a little picky, but not enough that it was a danger to finances. Taking care of babies as genin did little to prepare the young jonins for having to take care of a newly born infant almost 24/7. Uchiha Mikoto volunteering her help and experience to help lighten the load and teach them the deeper parts of the job despite having an infant of her own was a gift of the gods. Rin was finally starting to understand what all needed to be done. Between Mikoto volunteering and Kakashi's ninja hounds living in the house to help watch the little guy when they weren't around gave them enough time on their own to do low-rank and short assignments that could be completed within a day. Wherever Hiruzen-sama was getting the funds to give them extra money than the mission payouts should have been, she did not know, but she was not complaining. The few chances they had to train revealed some new developments for Kakashi and Obito. Kakashi had begun experimenting with altering the sustaining flow of chakra to the Chidori once the blade was created in specific ways. It revealed some strange changes that could be applied to the assassination technique. One particular alterations made the blade incredibly long, trading some of its piercing power for significant range. Obito's training with the Mangekyo revealed the awakening of the third and final standard ability of the Mangekyo, Susanoo. Obito had awakened the Amaterasu flames and the Tsukuyami Genjutsu over the 2 years since awakening the Mangekyo. However, Kamui was the first technique he had upon activation. He could only manifest a small ribcage to protect himself at the moment, but he could momentarily manifest either 1 or 2 arms of the skeletal portion of the construct. Hiruzen theorized that the sudden awakening was a result of the grief he suffered from Minato and Kushina's deaths. But that grief alone wasn't enough to push Obito to begin fully manifesting the skeleton of the Storm God's avatar or evolve it beyond that. This, however, exposed the turn of events that Obito had been hiding from everyone who knew about his Mangekyo. Each use was slowly blinding him. He had been undergoing treatment for eyesight problems to help either repair some of the damage or delay the blinding until a permanent solution could be found, if one existed. Rin asked him why, and his answer was slightly shocking. "You're always worrying about us, but I didn't want you to worry about this, not with how much I care about you." Rin questioned. "What are you saying?" Obito smiled almost ruefully. "I'm saying that I love you. I have been in love with you for a long time now, but I never told you because you were always interested in Kakashi. I figured that if I told you it would tear our little family apart, so I decided that I'd rather be miserable than to be responsible for tearing all of us apart. You don't have to respond if you don't want to, but I needed to tell you that." Rin always knew that Obito was a nice guy, but he tended to be reckless about most things. After hearing that confession and thinking about her memories of him, she realized that what he said was true. She ruminated on what Obito meant to her before an unwanted interruption shook her from her thoughts. I'll never fully understand you humans and your concept of romance and all the worry you attach to it. Geez, I was wondering why you hadn't been so chatty today, Sanbai. Ever since the QB was stopped you have been a lot chattier than you've been since you were sealed in me 2 years ago. Rude. I was quiet because something entered my sensory range that I recognize and I wanted to figure out what it is. I still haven't figured it out what it is. So best be on your guard. I will. Thanks, Turtle. I like being called Turtle rather than Sanbai. Noted, but don't blame me. You never said that before? Hey Rin. The Sanbai Jinchuriki looked over to see both Obito and Kakashi waiting for her at the door of the house they lived, Minato's house he left to them. As they entered they noticed something very alarming. Pakun! The hound was slumped over, eyes open, in an uncomfortable position. Kakashi examined him and found him to be in a genjutsu. Rin and Obito darted to Naruto's room to find the rest of Kakashi's hounds under the same genjutsu and Naruto's empty crib. Obito activated his Sharingan and focused on each one after the other. Genjutsu Sharingan, release! The hounds roused immediately. Kakashi and Pakun ran in soon after. The look in Kakashi's eye told his friends that he already knew what had happened and figured out what the plan was. Hunting season, and Obito had the perfect means to find their prey. Rin grabbed hold of Obito and Kakashi while the hounds cluttered around them knowing the drill that was about to be done. Kamui! And the spiral-shaped spatial hole opened and swallowed them into the Kamui world. The hunt had begun. The Reikage doesn't know about your mission nor does he need to know about it. We're correcting the failings of our predecessors and claiming the Uzumaki bloodline for Kumo. Take the Uzumaki child for Kumo. Ensure no one follows or finds out it was us. That had been the summary of the debriefing that the team from the Black Ops Division had received when they were given an assignment to make an incursion into the Land of Fire following an intelligence leak from Konoha. The Black Ops Division decided to send one of its 4-man teams without the Reikage's approval to prevent blowback should they be discovered and end up failing. What everyone questioned was how the division leader managed to recruit Anai Yujito for a 5th member. More than likely she had been tricked into believing the mission was known to the Reikage, but he decided to look the other way. When they were within 8 miles of Konoha, one member of the Black Ops team broke off to ensure a means of safe and mostly undetectable escape, and to destroy evidence should the worst occur. Everything had gone smoothly until they were within reach for the extraction of the target. Then Yujito started getting info about the target from the Nibi. To her surprise, the child was also the current QB Jinchuriki in addition to being one of the last members of the Uzumaki clan. Shortly afterwards the mission was just about compromised when Nibi began being detected by someone she referred to as her elder brother. Then they broke in and Jay put the Niken watching the target into a genjutsu. They slipped out completely undetected except for a handful of strange Konoha ANBU dressed significantly different from the standard Leaf ANBU uniform who let them pass for some reason. Then Z screamed for the group to start moving as fast as they could until they reached the 4-mile mark. When they reached that mark he explained to the group that those strange ANBU were root agents, members of Konoha's Deep Black Ops unit, whose leader was confirmed to be the Leak. Everyone began looking over their shoulder in anticipation for the catch after that tidbit. Marui, the storm release user of the group, began complaining about not being able to kill some fucking tree huggers. All things considered, it was going very well. Everything seemed to be going smoothly. They were just about 5 miles away from Konoha traveling at a leisurely pace to ensure no suspicion when Yujito's instincts began screaming. Her instincts saved her when the spatial hole opened up and spat out the dogs from the house they abducted the child from, as well as 3 shinobi, all of whom looked to be pissed. Their killing intent skyrocketed when they looked at Yujito and saw she was holding the child. At this point Yujito recognized who they were, Team Minato, collectively nicknamed the Seals of Fate for their collective mastery of Fuinjutsu, Uchiha Obito, Copy Nin Hataki Kakashi, and Noara Rin. Damn it Marui, you just had to start wishing that we got a chance to kill some fucking tree huggers. And then you jinxed us at the 11th hour. The girl with the brown hair and purple marks on her cheeks, she has the Sanbai inside her. Of all the ways my day could get fucked up it had to be this shitty way. Yujito slipped into her fighting stance as soon as she saw both the Copy Nin and Rin do the same. But if they want the target back then they're going to have to get through me first. This will be easy. Obito had been the first one to notice the blonde bitch holding Naruto. It took everything the Uchiha had to not go off screaming and murder the bitch where she stood to save him. The moment he took to stare gave him valuable information. One of the men has the kanji for water, lightning, and storm tattooed onto his arms. Most likely he's from Kumo's storm release bloodline. This group, they're from Kumo, they have the look standard to Kumo and the land of lightning, but they aren't wearing their forehead protectors or any other identifying symbol, which means they're here on a Black Ops mission. The blonde bitch holding Naruto is Anai Yujito, a special jonin and the Nibi Jinchuriki. If she is here, then someone pretty high up in Kumo must have ordered this mission. This will be hell, but we can work this so long as we divide and conquer. Obito stood there and smirked, saying, "Alright, funny joke. Hand over our brother, and your deaths will be painless." That pissed off the storm-release shinobi, who began making rapid-fire hand seals while spitting some insult about Konoha tree huggers. Obito watched closely with his Sharingan to figure out which jutsu the man was going to use before he finished. He's going to use a melee-range storm-release technique. Fist of the Rushing Storm by the looks of it. I can grab him, do a quick blow to his face to disorient him, Kamui him, and pop into the Kamui world at the same time to soften him up and detain him. Obito's prediction proved right when the man charged forward screaming, "Storm release! Fist of the Rushing Storm!" causing a mini storm to gather around his fist with lightning cracking frequently. Obito quickly countered with a punch to the man's face after grabbing him by his forearm, which was not covered by the jutsu, and quickly did a point-blank Kamui to warp both himself and his target to the Kamui world, leaving the other two Kumo shinobi and Yujito to Kakashi, the Hounds, and Rin. The man regained his senses by the time Obito fully manifested within the Kamui world, and he screamed, "What the hell is this place?" Obito calmly replied, "This is the Kamui world, a world created by my Mangekyo Sharingan and its special ability unique to it, Kamui. This place will either be your grave or your prison until we get back to Konoha, for you won't be leaving unless I allow it. And I have no intention of letting you leave this place uncondemned." Obito decided to test out one of his toys he had been neglecting to use in combat against single opponents ever since gaining it. The man blindly rushed at Obito, who swiftly countered and pinned the man in such a way to force him to make eye contact with Obito, who whispered the last words this man would hear in reality for a very long time from his perspective. "Tsukuyami." With that word, Obito's Mangekyo Sharingan bore into the man's soul, and then the world around them was supplanted by a ghastly landscape that could only be described as the Netherrealm Yomi from the traditional legends of mankind's origin. In the blood-red sky was a blackened moon with the Mangekyo symbol for Kamui imposed onto it. The Storm Release user quickly weaved more hand seals and screamed, "Storm Release, Laser Circus!" and fired off a barrage of blue-colored laser projectiles. But chains rose up and destroyed the projectiles before rushing him and pulling him to a thin cross-like post, and then tightly binding him to it. Panic and fear were worsened when he remembered how this hellscape came to be, and grew far greater when he heard the Uchiha's voice. "Welcome to the world of Tsukuyami." Obito let his killing intent run wild, with a murderous grin on his face, and the man who was clearly a year older than him was sweating with fear. Obito continued his speech. "This is one of the strongest genjutsus that a Sharingan can generate, and one of the strongest genjutsus ever created, but can only be used after evolving into the Mangekyo. Within this world, the controller of the genjutsu is like one of the kami, controlling all the things that exist in this hellish world: time, space, memories, imagination, and pain. I can only maintain the illusion for 24 hours in the perspective of normal time-space, but a second here is far different than what we perceive as one in the real world, and can last far longer than how eggheads measure to be a second in reality. Will you tell me everything I want to know to be spared of the torture that is about to unfold? What I wish to know is who sent you and why." The man attempted to do a genjutsu release to break the illusion. When it failed, he attempted to inflict pain on himself to snap back to his sense, but that failed as well. What the hell? If this is a genjutsu, then everything I've done should have broken it. Apparently you were not listening when I said that Tsukuyami is one of the strongest genjutsus ever created. You cannot break free by any method. Now will you answer my questions? The Storm Release user growled between grit teeth. "Fuck you, tree hugger. I'll make sure you're here for the full 24 hours. Obito then allowed malice to seep into his voice, which had been even till now. Fun fact that I didn't mention earlier: no matter how long we are in this illusion, in real time it will only be 3 or 4 seconds. Then everything that happened gets forcefully jammed into your head all at once while it gets gently put into mine. A true master can make the illusion last for 3 days and each second last upwards of 18 hours, with the sudden shock of the memories being forced into their head killing most people. For the 24 hours I control, each second lasts an hour. But the Mangekyo evolves in certain emotional circumstances, and limits might very well be shifting and being broken as we speak because I'm furious. For 24 hours or however long I now control, you shall be consumed by crows. As Obito said this, crows began circling overhead. The second will end when they have consumed every last bit of meat from your bones. You will feel every last bite being stripped from your body, and you will feel the pain of the carrions digesting you. Let us begin. The storm release user's screams filled the nether realm until the first second ended. Then it was filled with his crying. "I'll talk," his voice said while he trying to recover from the horror he had been subjected to. "Good, who sent you?" Obito stated his question. It was Shimo Hideki. The storm release user responded. "That doesn't tell me much." Obito countered. "He's Kumo's Deep Black Ops commander. Kumo doesn't have an outright division like Konoha does, as far as I know, just a few specially trained groups. The man's our equivalent of Danzo." The broken ninja stated. "That tells me a lot but doesn't answer the why part of my question." Obito stated. He was the commander of the group sent years ago to kidnap Uzumaki Kushina. His son Shimo Erasure was the field leader of the group. The storm release user answered. "So he is out for revenge in Kumo's advancement, while he's at it. Anything else I need to know?" Obito summarized and then asked, to which his prisoner just nodded before responding. "The mission was sent after we received an intel leak from Konoha just over 2 weeks ago. We followed up and found that it came from Danzo. Our superiors decided to go ahead with it. While we were escaping, we saw men that one of us identified as agents from Root, the division that Danzo runs within Konoha's ANBU. That is everything I know. Then we're done here. Release." And the world collapsed and they were kicked back to reality, the strain of the mental torture knocking out the prisoner, after which Obito restrained the man. Obito began sensing to observe the flow of battle, waiting for the right opportunity to warp into the real world to take back Naruto and bring him here. But when did his hands get clenched so hard that they ached? Rin and Kakashi stood before Yujito and her 2 partners that Obito didn't drag into the Kamui world. Rin weighed her options on what to do before eventually rushing Yujito to engage in taijutsu to get Naruto away from her. Kakashi rushed down her partner with his lightning cloak engaged, increasing his speed and striking power, adding a lightning element to his taijutsu and non-lightning ninjutsu while cutting the chakra cost and molding time for a lightning release. The other Kumo shinobi was slowly herded away from the other 2 by Kakashi's hounds. They were after his blood for trapping them in a genjutsu and making them look weak to Kakashi. There was hell to be paid. Rin opened with a punch that Yujito swiftly dodged and countered with a kick meant to either disorient her or distract her. Either way, Rin countered by going low and sweeping Yujito's other leg, which worked like a charm. Yujito quickly regained her balance and landed in a crouch before moving Naruto to her backpack and securing him so she could make free use of her hands and arms. The Nibi Jinchuriki quickly went through hand seals before screaming. Fire release. Blue Great Fireball Jutsu. Spewing out a giant blue flame that drew Nibi chakra to power it, Rin countered with hand seals of her own, screaming. Water release. High pressure water bullet, blowing out a massive high-powered stream of water, canceling out the fireball and doing some minor damage to Yujito. During this chaos, Kakashi's Ninkins managed to isolate one of the weaker Kumo nins from the others and managed to push the man to the ground before all the hounds each bit into him, restraining his hands from forming hand seals, and began pulling. The man screamed for help, but his teammates were too busy dealing with their own battles to help him, and within the minute his body gave and was torn apart by the hounds, getting revenge for him putting them into the genjutsu. Before Yujito could get up from the last attack, another Kamui portal opened up and Obito came out and grabbed Naruto off her back. "I'll be taking Naruto back, thank you." Before vanishing back into the Kamui world, Yujito began tapping into Nibi's power, forming her 2-tailed version 1 cloak around her as she fired off the Nibi's flaming hairballs, which turned into little blue flaming mice which charged Rin, who countered by powering up to her 3-tailed version 1 cloak and firing off more water bullets to put out the seemingly mobile fireballs. About this time, Kakashi tricked his opponent into rushing him for a taijutsu skirmish by making him believe he was gathering chakra for his next attack before quickly forming a Chidori and performing one of the known usable alterations that had been tested against clone combatants, to take advantage of his faint success. He screamed the name of the jutsu, which was the last thing the man ever heard. Chidori's sharp spear! Before the man died almost instantaneously by the complete destruction of his heart. By this point Obito had re-emerged from the Kamui world with his Mangekyo blazing. Kakashi quickly issued orders to Pakun and his pack. Get inside the Kamui world and protect Naruto. I have a feeling that things are really about to heat up. The dogs quickly acknowledged and went to Obito, who activated his Kamui and vacuumed the ninja hounds up. Yujito, seeing as she was backed into a corner even with the dogs being taken out of the fight, began tapping even deeper into Nibi's power, transforming into her version 2 cloak and pulling bones from her body from claws and a skull to increase power and protection. Obito began letting his rage at the attempted kidnapping leak out, his Susanoo bursting to life and fully manifesting its skeleton for the first time. The brawl began anew. Meanwhile in Konoha someone began sensing the chakra being emitted by all 4 combatants. They quickly donned their uniform and began quickly making their way to the battle-scarred field that was being made. They prayed that they would make it in time. Concurrently 2 miles away from the battlefield the 5th member of the group raced through the trees. He had detected the initial shots of the battle through his sensory. Usually in this situation, the mission would be scrubbed and he would be destroying evidence and making a break for it, but Yujito's participation as well as avenging the failure from years prior overtook the normally cautious Black Ops agent, and he began rushing in an attempt to salvage the mission. Back at the battleground, even with the power Team Minato had pulled out in an attempt to match the Kumo team, the raw power that Yujito was now channeling rendered it almost pointless. Any fire release thrown at her would just be absorbed and strengthen her. Water release thrown by either Kakashi or Obito was almost worthless against the raw power of Nibi's fire release. Rin's Sanbai enhanced water release was holding slightly better against the near-release state Yujito's fire release, but ultimately all Rin could do was stalemate the Kumo Jinchuriki. Physical blows were either cushioned by the chakra cloak to the point of ineffective or completely blocked by the bone armor. The one saving grace was that Yujito's mind was being degraded by the form. Obviously she never trained to fully control the near-release state, skipping it in favor of the far bigger Biju mode that made her a legend for defending Kumo from invasion in the most recent war. Rin's 2 years of being the vessel of the stronger Sanbai who had the elemental advantage over Nibi was outdone by Yujito's much larger pool of experience due to having the Nibi for the majority of her life and holding a few years on Rin and her teammates. Before Rin had a chance to recover, the feral Kumo Jinchuriki rushed her and slashed at her with the bone claws she had formed. Rin was barely able to get out of the way enough to avoid mortal damage or outright maiming, but her right arm took a nasty scratch on the surface. Any deeper, and it would have been worrying. Out of options, Rin began tapping further into Sanbai's power, hoping to achieve version 2 and use her rage to guide the state towards Yujito and beat her by overwhelming her. As Rin began digging deep to unleash this power, she found herself not on the battlefield but in the aqueduct prison cell of the Sanbai, who was staring at her most curious, as if contemplating a potentially life-changing choice. "Why did you bring me here, turtle?" Rin asked, trying to make it sound as politely as possible even though she was in no mood for it, but she didn't want to offend the Biju and have it cut off all chance of her victory. "Why did you decide that you wanted to be a shinobi of Konohagakure?" Rin found herself caught slightly off guard but decided to answer after a moment of contemplation. "I wanted to be a shinobi to prevent people from having to suffer, to heal those I could, and to punish those who harm people under my protection like Naruto." Sanbai tilted his head as if contemplating that answer before following up. "Why do you insist on fighting this Nai Yujito, despite the fact that you could run and nothing would be lost now that little Naruto is safe?" "Because if I allowed her to escape, she goes back to Kumo with the information about my and Naruto's Jinchuriki statuses and Obito's Mangekyo. She will be sent back with a new team to try again, even if it is not ordered by the Reikage, and this time she'll be gunning for him and me as well. She knows too much to be allowed to live, or to return to Kumo without having that information removed by Yamanaka, and even then her Biju will still remember, and if they're on good enough terms it'll be much worse. We can't let her leave, and she's completely loyal to Kumo. She has to be dealt with," Rin answered resolutely. Sanbai nodded in response before almost smiling at Rin and telling a story. A very long time ago there were 2 sages, brothers, who held an incredible ability for their day and still would be considered incredible by today's standards due to their skill. The ability to mold and manipulate an essence called chakra by combining their physical energies with their spiritual energies. The elder of the 2 brothers was called Hagoromo, and he was given the title the Sun Sage, and the younger was called Hamura, and he was given the title the Moon Sage. They used this power they possessed to challenge a terrible monster called the Jubi, the 10-tailed manifestation of the Shinju, or the Divine World Tree, that sought to take this power back from them after they were born with it from their mother, breaking a divine taboo and eating of the tree's fruit. In the end, they defeated the creature after a long conflict and sealed its chakra inside the Sun Sage, separating it from its body and turning the now empty shell into a statue. From that day forward, he was called the Sage of Six Paths due to the power he had awoken during the fight. He began teaching a discipline to those who would listen called Nishu, and used his great power to give others the ability to mold chakra. He believed that through his teachings and the potential held by chakra, peace could be achieved by having everyone understand one another. When the end of his life drew near, the sage drew upon the power of his eyes that he had awoken while fighting the Jubi, the Rinnegan, and split the power of the Jubi into 9 fragments, and gave them each their own name, shape, and existence. He gave them life. Each one chose a purpose towards creating the world the man they acknowledged as their father dreamed of before he drew his final breath mere minutes after birthing his strange children, younger than the 2 sons he fathered and whose bloodlines live on to this day under far different clan names than what their name originally was. The 2 brothers' clan's name, as well as that of their descendants for some time, was Otsutsuki. The clan brought the all-seeing Byakugan to this world, and all the Hyugas are descended from the Moon Sage, while Hagoromo Tusan's descendants are the Senju, and the Uzumaki by his youngest son Ashura, and the Uchiha by his eldest son Indra. Rin stood processing the story before she realized the implications of Turtle's last statement. "You called him Tusan, does that mean?" Turtle nodded. "Yes, the Biju are the 9 fragments. We were meant to be the protectors of mankind and the ones to guide it as my father wished. But after seeing the depths of darkness that mankind was capable of, we began to give up. The more extreme, like Kurama the Kyuubi and Shikaku the Ichibi, began killing humans en masse, at first trying to purge the corruption before giving up on that, but still killing because of how disappointed they were in humans for failing Hagoromo's wishes. Why are you telling me all this? The purpose I chose for myself was to be a protector and healer, to protect all those who sought protection where I dwelt in peace, and to punish those who came after them in the name of evil. Killing only those who were lost causes, who were too dangerous to be left alive. I'm telling all this to you, girl, because I believe you are the first human I have been sealed within for a very long time to truly deserve my power, as my purpose and yours are truly the same in my eyes. I would be glad to lend my power free of charge. We still have to hammer out our relationship for you to truly begin tapping my power and using it to its full potential, but for now what we have will do. Thank you, but if we're going to do this, we need to have it on terms we can both agree on." The turtle looked at her like she was crazy. She could tell he was confused at what she meant. "Good thing Sensei gave me the key to the seal he made to replace the original seal on me for when this day came. I just wish he was here to see the day he was proven right that I could be friends with the turtle." Rin unzipped her flak jacket before lifting up her shirt, forming a hand seal to make the Sanbai's imprisoning seal visible on her stomach. She held out her hand and kanji began to form and water coalesced at her fingertips. Sanbai's eyes went wide at the realization of what she was doing, collapsing the part of the seal that separated them and kept it contained in her mindscape. Rin clutched her seal and twisted hard. Sounds began to echo throughout the cell. Hinges starting to remove the rust and safety locks that prevented them from moving in the slightest, chains that were invisible and kept the Sanbai bound to his cell became visible and unbound from the turtle, and the sealing note covering the lock combusted and revealed the lock mechanism, which began to undo itself. Once the lock was gone, the doors swung open and then the cell bars rotted and sank into the floor, removing them from the landscape. The aqueduct vanished, replaced by a giant tranquil turtle pond where Sanbai could rest. The creature almost began crying in joy. Before noticing Rin standing in front of him, she gave a deep, respectful bow before saying, "Hello, my name is Noara Rin. What's yours?" The Sanbai gave as much of a bow as it could before it responded. "It is very nice to meet you, Rin-chan. My name is Isabu. Seeing as I have been crashing here without paying any real form of rent for 2 years, how about I give you a gift of my appreciation?" Isabu gestured and in a wave, red chakra rushed off of the turtle and began enveloping Rin, erasing the aches and pains that the brawl with Yujito had inflicted. She looked at the place on her arm where Yujito managed to scratch her with her bone claws and saw the open wound healing shut. But the chakra didn't stop there, and soon Rin began to feel stronger than she had ever felt. "Whoa! What was that?" "A gift of my appreciation. I fixed what I could and eased what I couldn't from your bout with Yujito before you began trying to reach version 2, and after that I merged a piece of my power into your chakra, allowing you access to a piece of my power even if you're cut off from it. It will grow with time, and tending to it will see it grow big and strong, like a plant." And with time I'll replenish that small piece given to you. Thank you for the kind gift, Isabu, Rin said with absolute sincerity. Isabu moved his right claw towards her in a balled-up fist. The gesture was for something that was eluding her. Put your fist against mine. Our thoughts will sync and nothing else will need to be said for now. No lies can exist in this. Rin did as she was told by her friend, and then she could hear the turtle's thoughts. However, one stood out amongst the rest. Wherever you lead, I shall follow, even to the ends of the earth and back. Rin thoughts gave her response for that statement. We are no longer prisoner and jailer, we are equals, and we are partners from now on. Starting today, we face everything the world has for us together. Isabu nodded at that before pulling his fist back, grabbing her, lifting her up, and setting Rin down on his head. Now let's go take that bitch down. Isabu responded with a roar and sending his chakra into Rin's system. What they had wasn't perfect, but it would do for now. Obito and Kakashi were forced to take over the fight due to Rin's unexpected conversation with the turtle. Obito's rage at what he had learned from that Kumo bastard he interrogated with Tsukuyumi had begun to seep out, causing his Susanoo to start maturing, gaining muscles, a demonic visage on its already demonic-looking skull, and a weapon by pulling out one of its ribs, which regenerated and molded the extracted bone into a lance. Had Obito been in any other situation, he probably would have commented on the gruesome way his manifestation of Susanoo had created its weapon, but now he couldn't care about anything other than punishing the woman who had been the key part in the plan to take away Minato-sensei and Kushina-sensei's son. Kakashi had uncovered his Sharingan to help even the odds, despite having the lightning cloak activated at the same time, which created a massive drain on his chakra reserves. Obito could tell without even asking that Kakashi was having the same train of thought as himself. Pity that Yujito isn't fully transforming into Nibi right now. I know she can because she stopped an invasion of Kumo during the last war by doing that to stop an army. I could probably use my Mangekyo to hypnotize the Biju and make finishing this fight even easier. She seems to be putting everything she has into this form and restraining herself to it rather than going further to win this fight. My bet is that Nibi knows that the Mangekyo can control Biju, and they must figure that if they bring out Nibi's full form, then she might be vulnerable to Mangekyo control. We'll just have to keep fighting. And with that, Kakashi and Obito shared a brief glance and nodded to each other, already knowing the plan. Kakashi rushed down Yujito, hoping to provoke her with a feint that would leave her open to an attack from Obito. She took the bait as hoped, showing that Kakashi's analysis of her declining mental state of awareness due to exposure to the Nibi's chakra in such a large concentration at once, and over the time they had been fighting without fully transforming, had reduced her to acting mostly on muscle memory and ingrained battle instincts. Obito quickly capitalized on her distracted state by having his Susanoo lunge forward with its lance, which Yujito noticed at the last second and moved to minimize damage she would be taking. The stab made contact with the bone casing surrounding her back, preventing any damage other than a crack in the improvised armor. Damn it, that bone is tough. Come on, Rin, we need you out here if we're going to take this girl down. Obito's anger and frustration at the seeming hopelessness of the current situation began to trigger another maturation of the Uchiha's pale blue-colored Susanoo. Skin had begun to grow on the giant Oni-like construct, and once the skin had fully covered the avatar, scales developed on the entirety of the entity's flesh. His rage drove him to strike with the Susanoo again, and this time it was faster than before, leaving Yujito no time to react, and the bone lance made contact with her bone armor, this time doing far more than just cracking it, but also piercing all the way through the bone and stabbing into her crimson-red cloak and nicking her skin, causing a flesh wound and drawing some blood and causing Yujito's savage form to growl in pain. Every time I think I'm just about at the limit of what my Sharingan is capable of, I find that I'm still just scratching the surface of its capabilities. Okay, it appears that the Susanoo responds to anger and frustration to mature itself. Okay, Obito, start digging deep and pulling all you can out and see if you can force it to continue evolving. While Obito was thinking this, Kakashi immediately ran through hand seals and screamed, "Water release! Water dragon bullet!" to capitalize on the opening that Obito's enraged attack had created by reusing water that Rin had expelled earlier in the melee. The howl of pain Yujito's body gave showed that the attack had made it through the hole in her armor, and did exactly as Kakashi hoped. By the time this had finished, Obito had brought all of his suppressed anger and frustrations to the surface and began channeling them to hopefully start evolving Susanoo again. It worked in that a robe formed itself around the demonic warrior, and the construct's muscle mass had appeared to begin increasing. The big changes had stopped, but Obito could tell that his Susanoo was still evolving. Obito prepared to strike with Susanoo again. His intent was to test just how much the Susanoo had its power increased, and use this attempt to give Kakashi an opening to get in his Raiden's Judgment combo when a sudden roar shook the field and a massive chakra spike drew all the combatants' attention to the source, Rin. Her version 1 began to thicken and darken dramatically, and her skin began flaying itself off to reveal a mass of dark Biju chakra beneath. The version 1 cloak began to compress and merge with the chakra that was underneath Rin's removed skin, before expanding back outwards and forming the shape of a monstrous turtle, similar to Yujito's form without the bone armor. She opened her eyes and mouth to reveal hollow white indentations where they would be. Obito wearily asked, Rin, are you in there?" His question was answered quickly. "Why, yeah, I am. It's a little hard to think and my body aches, but Turtle is working with me. He'll take over if I lose control of myself, and help you win this fight and keep me from hurting you. Yujito appears to be tiring. If we can pull off one well-coordinated attack against her with the right finisher, we can end this cat." Obito began to smile before realizing two incidents he hadn't dug up his emotions from. The illusion he was exposed to that awoke his Mangekyo, a vision of Kakashi impaling Rin through the heart with the Chidori, and the mission where Rin was kidnapped and implanted with the turtle in the first place, forcing her to hide something from most people and exercise deep control to prevent her secret from being exposed. He grit his teeth as the suppressed emotions involved began to seep into his conscious and overtook him, causing him to begin roaring in outrage, which his Susanoo mirrored as it began outwardly evolving again. Armor formed on its robe and a bird-like mask formed on its visage. A second set of arms formed and pushed their way out of the construct's shoulders joints before the clothing and armor formed around them as well. A shield formed on its main left arm opposite of the right arm that held the lance. The two arms that formed out of its back formed two small, curved blades that almost resembled a bird of prey's talons. Obito began to notice the extreme decline in his eyesight and pushed forward to end this fight as quickly as possible before his eyes were sealed by darkness. "Alright guys, let's end this," he screamed from his Susanoo, to which his teammates responded. Right. Obito willed his version of the storm god's manifestation to strike at Yujito, who quickly dodged and began spewing blue fire at the Uchiha. Rin countered by protecting him by unleashing Water Release, High-Pressure Torrent, which not only fully stopped the inferno but pushed it back swiftly and overpowered Yujito's attack and made contact with the feral Nibi Jinchuriki, weakening her. Kakashi quickly fired off his own water dragons at Yujito to kick her while she was down and unable to move. Obito quickly took advantage of the extended window provided by this. Obito quickly rushed forward from within his Susanoo and had it stab forward with the quickly maddening Yujito, using its lance as fast and hard as it could. It stuck at Yujito and destroyed the rest of her bone armor and pulling the now useless fragments back into her body. When he had the construct pull back its spear, blood covered the tip. Yujito was hurt badly now and they could end it now. "Kakashi, go for the Raiden's Judgment combo now!" Obito screamed and Kakashi acknowledged, rushing down his target and striking at her with rapid-fire taijutsu strikes enhanced by his lightning cloak, sometimes moving fast enough delivering strikes to appear as a bolt of light. The rapid assault battering her body left Yujito disoriented and unable to respond to the final strike of the combo. During his assault he was molding chakra for his finisher. The final strike of the combo was designed to be able to be swapped out with any jutsu that Kakashi needed to use or to place a seal to finish his opponent. Once the intended finisher was ready, he rushed forward and slammed his hand into her stomach, announcing his finisher to the opponent, who began screaming in extreme pain once the finisher made contact. 5-point suppression seal! The chakra of the Nibi was cut off and forced back into its seal, leaving Yujito's unconscious body on the ground with the injuries from the battle and her skin burned off. Obito's Susanoo began to flicker out of existence before he fell to the ground, exhausted. After a moment to catch his breath, he quickly activated Kamui to retrieve Naruto and release Kakashi's hounds from the Kamui world. As soon as that was done, he grabbed Yujito, restrained her, and pulled her into the Kamui world before he turned to Rin and Kakashi with eyes that were hollow and almost blind. Rin's transformation released and showed her skin as being slightly irritated but overall in much better condition than Yujito, before falling to her knees in exhaustion. Kakashi covered his Sharingan and deactivated his lightning cloak before walking over to Rin, holding Naruto in her arms after Obito handed him to her. He too collapsed by them once he was within touching distance. The three sat there for a moment before the cracking sounds of lightning caught their attention and drew them to a fourth cumin, and with a lightning-covered blade drawn and intending to kill them, But before he was struck down from behind where there stood an Anbu in a plain white mask with the kanji for root engraved on it, to who stood ready to apprehend the exhausted Team Minato and Naruto for Danzo. Fortunately, fate had other plans that stood to benefit the young jonins and their charge. A royal purple glow and a scream announcing a jutsu sealed the fate of the root agent. Arrow of Susanoo! A royal purple-colored arrow construct rushed by the tired youths and pierced the heart of the enemy they had just noticed and pinned him to a tree, failing his mission. The youths looked over to see who their savior was. Clad by a glowing purple four-armed Susanoo in an armored robe but without legs, wielding a long bow within its primary hands and a pair of dagger in its secondary hands. It was slender compared to Obito's, almost like it was supposed to be female, which the chest area confirmed by the look of the shaping. All three jonins shouted a name in amazement once they realized who their savior was after they dismissed their construct. Mikoto! The kind face looked at them, examining them to see their injuries, only to notice the baby boy of her deceased friend in Rin's arms before her own rage exploded at the implication, and her Sharingan reacted by returning to its Mangekyo form, and her Susanoo began manifesting again before she calmed down. I'll explain later. Can you three move? The youths nodded and got themselves up and grabbed the bodies of the attackers that weren't stored in the Kamui world. They quickly returned to the hidden leaf to treat the three youths' injuries and to hear Uchiha Mikoto's explanations on why she had a Mangekyo. It was going to be a long night. Danzo sat in his office in the root compound. 2.5 hours ago, he had created a security hole to allow the Kumo Black Ops incursion into the village to retrieve the Uzumaki. Just an hour ago his agents had reported that the Kumo Black Ops team had exited the village. Now all that was left was to wait for the agent sent to assassinate the Black Ops team to kill the Kumo scum and return with the Uzumaki. War with Kumo was within reach. Even if that agent failed to stop the Kumo team, there was a backup plan currently stationed within Kumogakure. If that plan had to be put into play, he had no doubt Chameleon would successfully retrieve the child. But it would most likely mean that war would not be achieved. But either way, the War Hawk would gain the Uzumaki to mold as he wanted. And what he wanted was what was good for Konoha, despite the village thinking otherwise. But its resistance to his will was futile. After all, he guided it from the shadows and was the foundation the village was built on. The root that held up this great tree called Konoha that peace-loving fools sought to destroy the supremacy of. Before Danzo's life was over, he would see Konoha rule the ninja world. It was only a matter of time and gaining the proper pawns. Chapter 3: A Storm Avoided. Fugaku was sitting at the table thinking about a string of inquiries levied against the military police by Danzo. Accusations of members committing abuse of authority, unlawful assault of Konoha citizens and shinobi, and outright treason claiming that the clan assisted with releasing the Kyuubi. The last one was kept behind closed doors due to the sensitive information involved. He sighed at just how petty the man had become after Obito called him out in the middle of the council chamber in front of all the clan heads and the civilian members. It seemed that Danzo was trying to provoke a reaction from the Uchiha to justify his stance and regain his public image. Everywhere Fugaku or anyone who bore the clan name Uchiha looked or went, stood the root drones observing them to report to their master, the one-eyed bastard. Though the internal clan problem that was proving to be as big of a headache as the one-eyed cripple was the Uchiha clan elders. The wrinkled old bastards had been attempting to stir up trouble trying to rally the Uchiha to take over the village. They had lived during the time of Senju Tobirama, the second Hokage, who was harsh in his treatment of the Uchiha but was far fairer in his treatment of their clan than his student Danzo. Tobirama would have given them a chance to prove their innocence. Danzo would want to elevate the severity and force a guilty verdict to wipe them out. Or perhaps, if taking root into consideration, simply kill every Uchiha who could not be completely reprogrammed, and simply destroy the clan on identifying level. Keeping simply those who could be programmed into Danzo's view of Konoha. Yes, the elders did have a point that the Uchiha had been locked and restricted to the military police, but it made sense considering the standard skill set possessed by an Uchiha, and it was becoming apparent that those in power were beginning to open up to changing that regulation. And it also seemed the elders had a self-serving memory when it came to the history of the warring states. Otherwise they would remember how many of Tobirama's brothers had been killed by Uchihas that those elders were descendants of and held up as paragons of the clan. It had happened twice. The elders attempted to play off the frustrations of those who would listen. The next time it happened, there would be hell to pay. Fugaku could almost see the horrified looks of indignation that would be on their faces when he had them taken away next time. A smile crept onto his face, hoping that they would do something stupid and give him a bit of satisfaction that he longed for at the moment. That small bit of joy from imagining what would likely be happening soon caused him to remember his last conversation with Hayashi. Sometimes it paid to have a fellow clan leader of a highly respected clan within the village. Because when the two or however many got together for a drink, usually one just had to start complaining about the pompous arrogance of their clan's members, traditions, or elders, and the other knew that pain from experience and sympathized without question. Apparently Hayashi was having his own headache with his clan's elders, especially with the upcoming birth of his daughter. That was a subject that had become a headache with Fugaku in a way due to one elder in particular, and the next time that damned Izayoi tried to order him to marry off Sasuke or attach one to the girl, Fugaku was going to burn the man to ashes and send the individual bags of his ashes to the rest of the elders with a note saying, "This is all that remains of Izayoi, who tried to order me on how to lead the clan. I lead this clan, you are to advise me. Remember that or share the fool's fate." Mikoto hadn't returned from checking on Minato and Kushina's son and their students. He was never told that Naruto was Minato's son, but common knowledge said that most Uzumakis would always have some shade of red for a hair color. Adding things together through investigation and finding known and adding them with previously unknown facts to find the truth that was hidden in a pile of lies and half-truths had always been a favorite pastime. Though he had the suspicion that Mikoto knew something about both Kushina and Naruto that she wasn't telling him. But considering how much effort was put into trying to keep what was left of the Uzumaki clan safe, perhaps this was simply one of those things that should left alone. Fugaku understood that, after all, how many would come after his clan if the full information on the Mangekyo Sharingan came out. Refocusing his thoughts on Mikoto, he looked at the time and realized she had been gone for an hour after she rushed in, grabbed a parcel of some sorts, and rushed out saying she was going to check on those kids. He thought about going after Mikoto to settle some nagging feeling in the back of his mind when the door opening caught his attention. He looked over to see the bloody and bruised bodies of Obito, Rin, and Kakashi enter carrying Naruto and the bodies of two ninja who appeared to be from Kumo and an ANBU wearing a uniform that the Uchiha was becoming too familiar with, Root, before Mikoto herself entered, wearing her mission uniform. "What happened?" he asked. Kakashi answered. "A Black Ops team from Kumo was sent to kidnap Naruto for them. The team had an Yujito as a part of it, but we managed to pull through. Mikoto-sama saved us from an ANBU who was attacked us afterwards. She said she would give us an explanation here." "An explanation on what?" Fugaku asked, a voice in his ear telling him that he already knew what. "On why she has a Mangekyo," said Obito, whom the Uchiha clan leader now noticed the hollow look in his eyes and the effort he was putting into his sight, probably due to some form of recently acquired injury. "Obito, what happened to your eyes?" asked Fugaku. Obito's response shocked him. "I have a Mangekyo, have had it for 2 years, and had to really put it to work to take down Yujito." That made sense, considering what he knew about the special Jonin. He then looked at Rin and noticed that her skin appeared to be highly irritated, as though she was suffering a mild burn on her entire body. Mikoto nodded in affirmation to what her nephew said and quickly went to grab a first aid kit to begin treating the teenagers. "Here, take this and put it onto your skin. My sensei made it for Kushina, who had a similar issue with her power going out of control and resulting in extreme irritation to her skin," Mikoto said, handing a bottle of something to Rin, who did as she was told. Once the kids had been patched up, she began her story. "I gained my Mangekyo on my final mission for Konoha, 3 years ago. The mission involved tracking down a criminal who had infiltrated the village and began carrying out assassinations of Uchiha authorities primarily, and other targets. He had escaped and made a run for it when he was figured out when a sensor placed at a projected possible target detected his strange chakra moldings and alerted the security. He was a genjutsu expert with high affinity and expertise in the art who possessed a unique jutsu to carry out his assassinations that was puzzling everyone. Most perplexingly, some of the bodies he left had wounds that were self-inflicted. My little sister, Obito's mother now, and I were sent after the man, along with an Inuzuka tracker. We had caught up to him at the Land of Fire border, heading towards Kuri, or at least in the direction of the Land of Water. He engaged us in a surprisingly polite yet clearly malicious conversation. If it was in any other setting I would have thought him to be a casual acquaintance. He introduced himself as Moyo and explained that he was carrying out a mission for his master by testing out a special jutsu that the assassin had developed before he revealed exactly how he carried out his assassinations. A mental brainwashing genjutsu that overrides and hijacks control of the part of the brain that controls muscle. movements. He even offered to demonstrate it. Before we could order him to stop or restrain him, he had used it. Apparently the man possessed some sort of dojutsu. Which one or what it looked like, I couldn't tell due to a spiral mask he was wearing, but he demonstrated the genjutsu by using it, and it was aimed at Nao, and she attempted to fight it, but her Sharingan was unable to counter the genjutsu for some reason. I was able to recognize it as a dojutsu-based jutsu due to the strange glow that was emitted from his mask's eye holes, a clear sign of the activation of a jutsu attached to a dojutsu. The tracker and I were forced to fight her as Moyo got away. Nao had managed to get in and kill the tracker that we had been teamed up with for the mission. Her movements were strange, as if she was being outright possessed and was being worn like clothes, but they were ill-fitting to the point of interfering with movement. But as her successful kill of our tracker proved, it still made her a strong ninja, even if she lacked the grace that she usually had. In the end I couldn't figure out how to break her out. She was able to speak through the control with some effort, and assured me she was at peace with what had to be done to stop her, so I was forced to mortally wound my sister. Her last words begged me to help take care of Obito after she was gone. I promised I would before she finally succumbed to her injuries and passed away. As the adrenaline wore off, I began to feel the pain, from injuries both physical and emotional. The only thought in my mind could think about was that I had just killed my baby sister. The pain in my heart felt terrible, and the burning inside of my eyes felt just as bad. The Mangekyo Sharingan, the kaleidoscope copy wheel eye, had been awakened in my eyes, awakened by my loss. When I got back I decided that I was done being an active ninja. I decided that my remaining family, Obito included, needed me far more than the village needed me. I still kept up with my conditioning and training. I never stopped improving, even using my Mangekyo in certain circumstances to see what it was capable of. I noticed after the first actual test I did on its capabilities that the usage had damaged my eyesight slightly. Most would have overlooked it till their sight had been damaged beyond saving, but I always prided myself for noticing small details. Thanks to my sensei passing on some of her knowledge of how the body works and recovers from injuries, I made sure to try and space out my usages of the Mangekyo as much as possible to allow time for my eyes to recover from the strain. Because if we were ever faced with a threat or problem that my power could help solve, I would do it without hesitation. I started out with access to Amaterasu, the Black Flames, which was easy enough to test. Over time I gained Tsukuyumi, the torturing hellscape illusion, that was harder to test due to its genjutsu nature, but I managed with help from some, shall we say eager volunteers, who had tried to kill my family. My Susanoo awoke after Obito left the clan 2 years ago, because I felt as though I had betrayed Nao's final request of me. I know that I shouldn't have felt that way about it, but one thing I have learned in my life is that you could understand something perfectly in your mind, but your heart has a will of its own and rarely understands things the same way. But my despair after losing Kushina in the Kyuubi attack had given me the push my Susanoo to its current highest form, which was what you saw earlier. The three kids thought about what had been said by the Uchiha matriarch. However, Obito spoke up about something else. I know this may be off topic, but you hardly reacted to my eyes being nearly blinded by Mangekyo usage. I know my eyesight is just about gone, but I don't think that is the problem. How long have you known about my Mangekyo? Mikoto smiled softly. Obito, you don't realize just how much you act like Nao and me. I've known since you returned from that mission into the Land of Water 2 years ago. You did exactly what I did after getting my Mangekyo, cut out anything you believed to be less important in favor of where you believed you were needed most, which in your case was your team. Rin spoke this time. Mikoto-sama, is there any way to heal the damage to Obito's eyesight? Mikoto's expression went slightly grim. I'm afraid not through medicine. The damage inflicted on the eyes can be mitigated somewhat by newer treatments, as Obito has proved. Yes, I am aware of that. But there is another way. After I received my Mangekyo, I began to dig through old texts in the clan's records and found an interesting bit of history. The first Uchiha in known history to awaken the Mangekyo was Izuna, followed by his elder brother Madara. One of the texts left by Madara reveals that there is a power beyond the Mangekyo called the Eternal Mangekyo. It is activated by swapping the activated Mangekyo Sharingan between two Uchihas of close blood relation. The only known manifestation in known history was Madara himself, who took the eyes of his little brother Izuna after Senju Tobirama killed him in anger and vengeance for the death of his last younger brother at the hands of a gang of much older Uchihas. The Eternal Mangekyo completely reverses the damage done by the Mangekyo upon awakening, and eliminates the possibility of going blind and cuts the chakra requirements for usage of Mangekyo, as well as significantly reduces the strain caused by Mangekyo Jutsu. I believe my eyes and Obito's are compatible. His mother was my twin sister, so our genetics should be similar enough to trigger the change. We need to have it done if we hope to prevent Obito from going completely blind. Obito, we don't know if my eyes and your eyes are compatible, but if you wish to save your eyesight, are you willing to take the risk and see if it works? Obito took a long breath before he responded. Yeah, let's do this as soon as we can. Mikoto looked at Rin before continuing. Rin-chan, are you capable of performing transplants between live subjects? Rin nodded. Yes, I am. How do you think that Kakashi got his Sharingan in the middle of a mission from a rogue Uchiha? Mikoto continued. Good. Fugaku, I need you to call an emergency council meeting once we're done and get Rin and Kakashi there along with the bodies. And do not mention Yujito in the slightest. Her husband nodded in approval, before his expression turned gleeful. Based on the presence of a root agent, Danzo is involved in this mess. He defied a direct order of the Hokage, which means punishment will follow. To be part of the effort that brings that one-eyed bastard down is an honor and privilege I will gladly accept. We have a clean, sterile room in the compound for complex procedure if needed to be done to unstable victims, officers of the military police, and arrested individuals awaiting transfer to the prison. We'll do the transplant there, Mikoto said as she led the two kids to the room in question. Finally finished. Rin thought to herself after finishing a last check to ensure the chakra coils had been properly connected between her two patients' transplanted eyes. The strange chakra molding occurring within the eyes must mean that Mikoto's theory was right. The two Uchiha's eyes were compatible. Rin estimated it would take 2 weeks for the connections to stabilize enough for usage without complications. Rin turned towards her next two patients, Anaya Yujito and the storm release user identified as Marui. Obito had pulled them out of the Kamui world before he was sedated to begin operating. Rin had to make sure Yujito could survive until her fate was decided. The injuries that had been inflicted on the Kumo Jinchuriki had already begun healing due to her Biju. Rin merely treated her skin, healed the open wounds on the girl, and finally went over both Kakashi's 5-point seal and Obito's chakra binding seal to ensure effectiveness. Then she moved on to Marui and dealt with anything he had that might be life-threatening. Rin panted in exhaustion after finishing, getting some rest before she had to go before the Konoha Council. Her thoughts wandered back to some of her precious memories. Her and her teammates passing Minato-sensei's genin test was the first. The second was Kakashi finally opening up to her, and Obito. The third was the training that had taken more than half a year to complete, when Minato-sensei passed his Rasengan technique down to his students. However, her mind wandered towards the middle of the second phase. Obito had been lagging behind both herself and Kakashi. His progress for the day was steadily declining, and he seemed to be regressing. Then he made a comment that set off her mental flags. Why can't I do this like I was earlier? And why do my hands like I burn them on a fire? Rin quickly stopped her attempt and grabbed his hands and removed a set of gloves he had started wearing. What she found confirmed what she thought it was. You're done training for today, Obito. These are chakra burns from overexerting Tenketsu. I can put something on them to help them heal, but you have to give those Tenketsu a rest. Obito had been known to stubbornly put off the advice of people if he thought it to be getting his way, but he just nodded and allowed her to get to work. Once she was done, she turned to him and said, You need to be more careful. If you want to be Hokage, you need to know when you're at your limit and back off. Obito just grinned before responding. Alright, Rin. I will. Sorry about worrying you. He wandered off while Rin went back to attempting to complete the phase. Kakashi was giving her a look that she couldn't quite read. When she asked him about it, he merely shrugged and told her don't worry about it. Obito's confession a few weeks ago made a few things slide into place in both that memory and others as well. Then a voice chimed in. I was wondering when you would pick up on his behavior. I thought human romance confused you. I said the worry you humans attached to it confused me. I have been around humans long enough to read their behavior. Was Obito really that obvious about his feeling towards me? Based on the 2 years I have been in you, I would say yes. Do you know what you're going to do about it? I'm going to give him a chance. He's a really nice guy who put a lot of other things before himself. He has earned it. Obito and Mikoto both began to rouse from their anesthesia-induced slumber to aid in the procedure to notice the darkness that was their vision before feeling around their eyes to find bandages. We need to leave those on there for 2 weeks as your eyes adjust to your bodies. The Uchihos responded in affirmation before a question was asked by Rin. Mikoto-sama, Why do you want the power found in those eyes even if you have given up being a ninja? Mikoto smiled softly before responding. Rin-chan, there's no need to be so formal. Mikoto will do. I don't want the power. I want the guarantee that is attached to it, that I won't go blind and miss my boys' lives because I cannot see from using this power to protect them. Obito cut in. Hey guys, how are we going to remove Yujito and that other guy from the Kamui world? Rin shook her head at how air-headed Obito could be sometimes. Obito-kun, you should remember that you pulled them out before I operated. Obito scratched his head in embarrassment. Yeah, I kind of forgot about that, and just had a moment of panic. Before he paused, his brain having finally caught up to what Rin called him, giving her massive amused smile. Wait, why UCC called me Obito-kun? Does this mean? Rin cut him off before he decided to start rambling and say something that would ruin the moment. Yes and no. I don't know if what I feel for you is or will be the same as what you obviously feel for me, but I'm more than willing to give you chance. Obito smiled and softly said, Thanks Rin-chan, I won't make you question your choice. Mikoto merely smiled and thought to herself, to be young and in love. Fugaku and Kakashi both walked in with the Uchiha head speaking. It's time. Rin nodded. It was time for Danzo's swan song. The council was silent as crypt after the revelation of the attempted kidnapping and its thwarting. No one said a word as they wondered how a 4-man Black Ops team managed to get into Konoha without ANBU finding out and alerting others. Danzo had demanded where the other 2 members of the team were, but Kakashi countered claiming there wasn't enough of a body left for one member, and the other that was still alive was in the military police's custody. Hiruzen attempted to wrap things up before Rin revealed one last piece of evidence. Hokage-sama, there was another ninja there. An ANBU wearing a uniform I had never seen before killed the last member of the Black Ops team and moved to kidnap all 4 us plus the one we apprehended alive. It was only thanks to Obito pushing past his limits and reacting as fast as he could that saved us. Danzo's heart sank at that mentioning and only his self-control stopped him from going pale. Then Rin pulled out another storage scroll and unsealed the body of the root ANBU. The council went pale at the leaf symbol engraved on the ivory mask. One of their own had attempted to kidnap the son of one of its heroes. But everyone knew who sent the ANBU. Upon noticing the killing intent from Hiruzen suddenly appeared despite the man appearing calm. He slowly turned to Danzo and said, ANBU, arrest Shimura Danzo for defying the order to disband Root and ignoring my order to leave Naruto alone. Have his ability to mold chakra permanently stripped from him, and put him in a cell to await punishment. ANBU quickly complied. Danzo quickly shouted, You shall not! I have devoted my entire life to Konoha and its advancement. Hiruzen stared for a second before responding. I'm sure you're right about that, Danzo, but you have lost sight of the difference between the good of Konoha and the good of Danzo. Obito was proven right about his accusation towards you. You may share Tobirama-sensei's fears of the Uchiha and other villages, but it is clear to me that part of his decision to choose me as his successor was based on that he saw that an extremer version of his views could not be allowed to take root in Konoha chain of command, if the village was to become truly great. Danzo looked at Koharu and Hamura, hoping that 2 who shared his view would defend him, but he saw the look that had set into them with Hiruzen's response. The ANBU grabbed Danzo and the crippled war hawk went with them, knowing he was beaten and there was nothing he could do. Hiruzen spoke up. If there is nothing else, we will reconvene tomorrow. Kakashi, Rin, meet me in my office. The 2 complied and followed the old Hokage there. I know there was more to the story than what you told in the council room, so tell it now. Hiruzen commanded the teenagers. Rin spoke. One of the members of the Black Ops team was Anai Yujito, the current Nibi Jinchuriki. She was the one we claimed there wasn't a body left of. Kakashi took out a kunai and used it to draw blood before running through hand seals and summoning the restrained Jinchuriki using the seal that was applied to her as part of her restraints. Hiruzen immediately answered. We should return her to Kumo and hope this was an isolated incident. Kakashi spoke now. Apologies, Hokage-sama, but we cannot allow it. She knows too much, and if she is returned even with her mind wiped of any useful information, her Biju still has it. We need a response that will get the point across. We will not tolerate this kind of action. Hiruzen sighed, knowing that the copy Nin was right and knew where it was headed. What do you suggest? Summon Jiraiya-sama to have her Biju transferred to a new host. The 2 youths answered as one. Hiruzen nodded sadly, knowing that this would most likely mean the end of any hope of peace with Kumo, while also understanding that this message had to be sent. I'll send him a letter. Mount Myaboku, the home of the Toad summoning clan, Jiraiya sat among the statues of the failed sages as he pondered. He had begun reflecting on the events of the past 2 weeks. News of Minato's death had reached him when Geratora arrived. Jiraiya decided that for now it would be best to let the pain settle and the wound of the loss of the man he loved like a son heal. Jiraiya had sent a message to Hiruzen sensei, who had retaken the Hokage hat, soon after. His message stated that anonymous funds would be given to the Hokage's office starting 2 weeks after the death of Minato, and it would come in bi-weekly consistently afterwards and was to be silently shuffled into the mission payment of the brats taking care of Naruto and helping to pay for genin teams to assist in his care for when they needed it. He had visited Konoha to attend the private funeral for both Minato and Kushina, which was a few days after the attack. He paid for any expense that would be incurred. He came back to Miyaboku to find some quiet to write, and now that he had all of his research compiled for his next Ika book, and to train to better master Sage Mode in his off hours. He was soon distracted by Fukusuka coming rather hurriedly. "Jiraiya-chan, the seer Toad has summoned you. He had a vision in the night that you need to hear." Jiraiya gathered up his material and began heading to the pool that the seer Toad, Gamamaru, made his home in. Jiraiya knew that it was big, if Fukusuka was this excited about it. Upon arriving, they were met with the sight of Gamamaru more awake and alert than Jiraiya had ever seen him. The ancient Toad sage spoke. "Jiraiya-chan, so good you came as fast as you could. The boy who was born not so long ago, the boy of your student Minato, I had a vision more clearly than my usual premonitions, far more detailed, and I know that it involved him last night. He alongside 2 others had become the successors to my original disciples, before there were Toad summoners. The boy is one of the last heirs of the clan of the Whirlpool. Within him lies the Kyubi no Kitsune, a fallen protector of this world. The boy has been deemed the successor to Ashura. The desire to protect and one day lead shall burn within him, a wild orange flame that is brighter than many infernos. While one born before him from the clan of the Crimson Eyes that read those they see, was deemed the successor to Indra, a raging and vengeful hatred shall burn a dark blaze within him, and shall bring him to target those who have committed many evils, and they shall be struck down by the glowing purple haze cast by his flame. These 2 names that I have mentioned are the sons of one of my first disciples, Otsutsuki Hagoromo, who you know as the Sage of 6 Paths. One who is yet to be born, yet you will know more about her than she will know about herself for a long time, was born to the clan of the Pale Eyes that see all around them. She is deemed the successor to my disciple, Otsutsuki Hamura, known as the Moon Sage. A gentle blue flame fueled by the desire to protect her own, like a mother cat and her kittens, shall burn within her. They will inherit the powers of their predecessors and challenge a great evil that will be appearing before 2 decades have passed, and through their victory shall Hagoromo's dream of peace be made fulfilled. But if they fail and are defeated, then this world shall disappear. And you shall be one of many who helped shape their path. For young Naruto and this girl yet to be born, you will be the one of 2 guiding stars down their path." Jiraiya looked up almost awestruck as he realized just what had been told to him. The sage was real, among many other revelations. However, a small monkey summon appeared before them with a message intended for Jiraiya. The seer Toad commanded, "Read it, then make a choice. Your new path starts now. We will be resuming this conversation at a later date." Before closing his eyes and slipping back into the disposition that Jiraiya had always seen of the seer Toad. Which brought Jiraiya back to the present. The letter the monkey had carried contained news that the Nibi Jinchuriki had led a Black Ops mission into Konoha, but she was captured and her Biju was to be transferred to a new host. The letter requested instructions for finding a viable host for the Biju and his assistance with the transfer. Jiraiya had just finished his response that yes, he would be there within a week, and the message included a method to extract a tiny bit of the Nibi's chakra and use it to test for host viability in a hot/cold style manner that could be measured to find a viable candidate. However, the Toad Sage had a nagging feeling that the prophecy was tied directly to what was now happening. A week later, Jiraiya had arrived at Konoha early that evening, taking his time after leaving Miyaboku to reflect and make a few decisions. He had arrived and found the house the 3 teens were staying in easily, mostly because it was Minato's house. He had been welcomed in by Kakashi, who directed him to a living room where Obito sat with bandages blindfolding him, and with Naruto's crib nearby, probably due to paranoia after the Kumo attempted kidnapping. They said that the bandages were due to come off in a week. He decided to get the conversation about why he was asked to come going. "So have you found anyone who's compatible with Nibi yet?" Kakashi answered as Rin was preparing the food. "Yeah, we have. But it's a tad bit complicated, Jiraiya responded. Well, we have time. The teen had explained that they tested many children trying to find a viable host, but due to unsatisfactory results were forced to begin testing on the members of minor clans to find a compatible host. Those tests yielded slightly better results, but still not good enough to be used for the Jinchuriki. They moved up to major clans, and the few tests they did went much better. Out of the ones tested from the major clans, those from the Hyuga clan did far better than the rest. So we decided to narrow the tests down to members of the Hyuga, and the result of the last one tested is the most promising, but we did a second test on that candidate to be extra certain, and it was still the best we had seen. Kakashi finished. Well, who is it? Jiraiya asked. Are you aware of Hyuga Hitomi, Hayashi's wife? The silver-haired teen asked. Jiraiya wondered where this might be heading. Yeah, she was Tsunade's student, wasn't she? With Kushina and Mikoto, but she was the only one of her genin who took up medical ninjutsu beyond mere basics. Kakashi nodded. Yeah, that's her. She's pregnant with her first child, a girl, and we ran both of the tests with her permission. The child is a match. She can properly contain the Nibi, but Hitomi isn't due until late December. Furthermore, Hitomi is the best scenario we could have hoped for because of her loyalty to the village before her clan. Jiraiya responded. The due date is not too much of a problem. We just need to keep Yujito alive until then, and that would give us plenty of time to figure out how to pick the lock on her seal in preparation for the transfer. At that moment, Rin brought the food to the table before guiding Obito to the table and taking a seat next to Obito. Alright boys, the food is done. Save business for later after we're done eating. Everyone agreed unanimously. 20 ANBUs were at work dismantling the root division. Thankfully, they had help from a 12-year-old member who was the highest-ranking member of the division following the mass detaining of the captains of the unit. Unfortunately, he had been part of the unit for so much of his life that documentation for his original identity no longer existed. The only name he had was the name he had been given by the captains of the unit, Shin. The ANBU leading the dismantling, Tenzo, was a former member of the Rogue Black Ops unit and understood too well what happened to the exceptionally young recruits. The other ANBUs were horrified at the extremely young age that Danzo had begun scouting for recruits at. The most recent one was just a year old, and his identity had already been destroyed, though the documents had indicated that his parents died in the QB attack just a few weeks ago. The only name he had now was Sai, though Shin had volunteered to take care of the boy. Documents indicated that Danzo had plans for forced recruitment of multiple children, even children from clans. The eldest of which were being targeted before Danzo was taken down were Yamanaka Fu, a noted to be exceptionally gifted Yamanaka, and Aburame Torian, who possessed a genetic mutation that rendered him unable to host the standard Aburame Kikaichi parasites but gave him an astoundingly high affinity for the clan's least known and most deadly insect type, the Rinkachu, the phosphorus nanoinsects. A species that functioned more like a potent disease that tore apart the bonds between cells with their venom. Research on the bug done out of curiosity after discovering the information on them would be haunting Tenzo's nightmares for a month, and made him wish he hadn't. The fact that any Aburame could theoretically host them with the right conditions present made him shudder. The sole comfort was that only a few Aburames had the conditions present to host Rinkachu, and Torian was the only one to be able to host the deadly insect species for some time. However, the most damning thing he would be hearing today would be now. Sir, I found a mission document, said one of the operatives who was assisting Tenzo in going through the document office. And? Asked Tenzo. It's incomplete, replied the ANBU. Tenzo's eyes went wide. If it was incomplete, it meant that it was ongoing and that the operative carrying it out hadn't returned yet. Does it list who was sent and what the mission was? Tenzo asked. It does both, sir. It lists their name as Chameleon and their mission was to retrieve Uzumaki Naruto should the initial operation fail. The order that the operative was initially given was to infiltrate Kumo and wait for further orders. The ANB replied. Which means he is still there. Do we have his personnel file? Tenzo asked. Yes, I found it earlier. And his is much longer than most operatives his age, the subordinate replied. Why? Tenzo asked precariously. Because it listed the amount of experimentation he was subjected to and what each entailed. The experimentation afforded him accelerated growth both physically and mentally, cut the rate of decay due to age, and gave the young boy an accelerated rate of healing comparable to that of a Jinchuriki. Unlike the others, there was an actual name attached to his file rather than just a call sign, due to the unique circumstances of his recruitment. He only had a given name but no clan or family name. His name was Kabuto. 2 months later, December 27, screams had already rang through the halls of the delivery ward as Hyuga Hitomi fought to give birth to her daughter. Labored breathing from the new mother and soft crying from the newborn girl were all that remained of the pain screaming and hormone-addled rage that previously plagued the room. Hitomi finally had enough of her clarity returned to her that she gave her daughter a name. "Welcome to the world, little Hinata-chan." Rin moved to speak. "Hitomi, we need to get on with the sealing. We need to get it done before Yujito figures out a way to break free." Hitomi nodded but asked one thing. "I want to be there." "I figure you would say that." "Obito-kun helped me get her into a wheelchair," Rin said somewhat somberly. The Uchiha affirmed. "Right." After making sure Hitomi was secure, and after looking her in the eye with his Sharingan active, Obito softly said, "Kamui," dragging the adult in the wheelchair, himself and his girlfriend, and the infant into the Kamui world before exiting in the ritual place where most of the seals had been set up and were awaiting Hinata. Jiraiya turned to them and spoke. "About time you got here. Why is Hitomi asleep? Did she want to come and be here but fainted due to exhaustion, or what?" Rin then looked at Hitomi's face to see that yes, she was asleep. Obito responded, "I put her in a time-delayed forced sleep genjutsu. I have a feeling that what we're about to do, she doesn't need to see." Jiraiya nodded before going to do a final check on the array he had set up. Rin gently picked up the infant out of her mother's arms and placed her in the intended spot, while Jiraiya went to work placing the needed formulas onto her for the ritual to work and hide all trace of her soon-to-be-held Jinchuriki status, except for her unnaturally powerful as well as fast-growing chakra reserves, fast healing, and her ability to tap into her Biju's chakra. The seal would only be visible to standard sight when chakra was molded a certain way. What he was building he was borrowing from the design of the seal placed on Naruto, including the part of the seal that hid it from the Byakugan. Hiruzen had told him that Minato had gotten paranoid about some things and Jiraiya couldn't believe that something would spook Minato this bad, but the anti-Byakugan measure built into the seal on Naruto proved it. Jiraiya made sure that Obito integrated his Kamui marker into this seal as well. One final check with the newly added half of the overall array, because you can never be too careful with something like this. Once he was done, he walked over to Yujito and removed her gag momentarily and positioned himself to quickly replace it should she attempt suicide by biting off her own tongue. "Got any last words, kitten?" Yujito shot him a venomous glance and said, "Go to hell, Kumo will avenge me and take back the Nibi. As well as claim the Kyubi and Sanbai." Jiraiya shrugged before responding, "That's pretty much what I expected to hear from you." Following up by replacing the gag to stop any attempts at suicide during the process. Fuinjutsu, Biju Containment Transfer Seal, activate. Muffled screaming from Yujito began as the Nibi was pulled from her, tearing apart her chakra system and depositing the flaming monster cat into the seal array placed on Hinata's stomach. Rin and Obito both could tell that the child was in discomfort but held off on helping to ease it until the sealing was complete. Rin was starting to understand why Obito placed the genjutsu on the woman. No mother should have to watch their child like this with nothing they can do that wouldn't end up hurting the child. Hinata's soft crying had begun again, and Rin could imagine the cries tearing her mother apart to have to watch her precious daughter go through such an ordeal if she hadn't been sedated. After 2 more minutes the sealing ended, the dried-up husk of Yujito collapsed through her bonds and fell to the floor with an almost sickening sound. The kanji that was drawn onto Hinata's body began pulling together to form the seal on her stomach. Obito placed his hand to Hitomi's head and released his genjutsu on her, waking her up. "What happened?" the slightly disoriented woman asked. "I placed you in a genjutsu. I figured it would have been for the best." Obito responded. Hitomi nodded before turning to her child and whispering, "You may hate me and be angry with me for what I had allowed to be done when we tell you one day, but one day you will understand, Hinata-chan." Rin could feel Isabu's thoughts. Hopeful that the Nibi would be able to get along with her new host and be able to regain some of her faith in humanity. But guilt, for by his allowing, she had been caged up like an animal once again. To sum it up nicely, the Nibi had a new Jinchuriki and a new prison. But Rin held out hope that Hinata would be the last Jinchuriki of the Nibi. Chapter 4: Coming of the Rising Dawn. 5 days after the Nibi sealing. Unknown location within a cave hidden within one of the elemental nations stood 4 people, all of whom were shrouded in black cloaks, but only 3 were decorated with a red cloud pattern. The odd one amongst the group wore a white mask with a black and red flame pattern adorning it. From the eye holes of his mask, a faint glow could be seen. The one next to him was a strange fusion of plant and man. Half of its body was white with a green cat-like eye, while the other half was black with a yellow eye. Around its neck and head was a Venus flytrap-like protrusion. The next one in the meeting was the sole female of the group. She possessed orange eyes and blue hair, decorated with an origami construct stylized into a rose. The final one possessed orange hair and rippled purple eyes, with piercings made of an unknown metal visible on the entirety of his head, and presumably more hidden by his clothes. "Zetsu, what news do you bring?" asked the young woman in an almost eerie monotone. "Well, Conan, since you asked, Madara-sama has recovered almost enough from his attack on Konoha to begin attending meetings again. He severely underestimated just how bad his condition was after his fight against Hashirama over half a century ago due to him having been in little combat during that time, resulting in the Hokage inflicting such damage requiring a long recovery time." The strange creature identified as Zetsu responded, in two separate voices for each half of his body which seemed to be separate entities, replied to the woman identified as Conan. "And what of the rumor concerning Danzo?" asked the purple-eyed man. "It would seem that rumor is correct. Danzo has been removed from power. But that is just the surface to the story, Pain-sama. Oh yes, he was put down by one of his own machinations backfiring on him. He allowed a Kumo Black Ops team with their Nibi Jinchuriki in to kidnap the boy who we identified as the Kyubi Jinchuriki so he could take the boy from them. We don't know if either party knew this fact going in, but they were stopped before they could escape the land of fire. Danzo was exposed thanks to his Root A and BU deciding to try and kidnap the rescuers and the boy and the captured Nibi Jinchuriki and failing. The third Hokage removed him from any position he held, ordered him imprisoned with his chakra molding capabilities sealed during the following council meeting that night after his interference was made known, and that his root division is being dismantled, and from what we could tell that process is almost finished. But they haven't executed him, only by the insistence of the village elders and recognition for what he has done that has been good for the village. He has a life sentence, and all of his captains from Root have been imprisoned as well for their part in his crimes." The strange creature explained to the man now identified as Pain. "Anything else?" Conan asked. "We found Yujito's body in storage to be sent back to Kumo as a warning. Her cause of death was extraction of her biju, but we don't know who it was transferred to nor when it occurred. The best guess we have is that it probably occurred within the last week. Thanks to her fight with the rescuers, we now have identified Konoha's Noera Rin as the Sanbai Jinchuriki." The strange creature responded. "Good. But I see that your master sent you with a question of his own for us, so what is it?" Pain responded. "Madara-sama does inquire when you plan to take Ami and kill Hanzo, and so we asked for him." Zetsu's white half said. "We plan to move within the next few months, preferably the week that spring is due to begin. That way a symbolic changing of season for Ami's leadership will occur with our takeover, along with the parting of the perpetual rain clouds that cover the land of rain for the first time in living memory, allowing a brief respite from the constant downpour to the people of Rain, many of whom have never seen sunlight in their lives." Pain responded. "The perfect way to bring Ami's people to your side with what we already planned out, and convince them of your godhood." Black Zetsu responded. "That is the plan. Now we have tasks to attend to in preparation. And the part that you, your master, and this Moyo have to play are pivotal to our success," Pain said. Zetsu nodded before both the creature and the voiceless member, identified as Moyo, merely walked away. Time was ticking away until the day of reckoning. Konoha 1 month following the Nibi sealing. Alright, today marks 1 full month with the Nibi in her, and there are no signs of damage on the seal. The seal placed on Hinata is effective. We don't have anything to worry about," Jiraiya said to the assembled group consisting of Team Minato, Hitomi, and the third Hokage. There was a collective sigh of relief from everyone present, Jiraiya included, each for their own personal reasons. For starter, it meant no additional work was required, which carried the distinct possibility of the entire seal being compromised with the slightest mistake in the right spot, resulting in Hinata's death, and the release of the Nibi, resulting in even more death. For Team Minato and Jiraiya both, it meant they were no longer confined to Konoha. Jiraiya was free to resume his duties outside as the primary information gatherer for Konoha as well as his research. Rin, Kakashi, and Obito could freely take missions to help ease their finances while leaving at least one of them in the leave to take care of Naruto. The group had unanimously agreed to keep Hayashi in dark about this for the time being. They were all nervous about telling him everything and risked the information somehow reaching the Hyuga elders that one of their own was the new Nibi Jinchuriki. Thank the kami that last-minute matters came up that demanded Hayashi's attention and got him away from the delivery room. Though they were a little perplexed about the convenience of the situation, it was almost as if someone had manufactured it. Who the hell had helped them was the question. But back to the matter at hand, Rin had volunteered to take care of Naruto for the first few months before going out on missions again and leaving Kakashi or Obito on care duty. The thought of either one sitting around taking care of Naruto without whether herself or Mikoto or any other person she trusted who knew how to take care of a child. Damn it! Is this what it feels like to be a parent worrying over their child? Because honestly, I'm terrified. On the more positive note, you're getting valuable experience for later on if you decide to have kids of your own, specifically the worry. That thought terrifies me even more, ironically enough, but I definitely see your point. I think my fearful thoughts about being a parent are based on my own misgivings about myself at my current point in my life. Oh, thank goodness I was on the right subject. I figured that I was, but I wanted to be sure that it was. I'll be honest, I spaced out a little bit, and I thought you may have been suffering worries in your shinobi career or love life. Wow, that is mild compared to your usual sarcasm. What is the problem? Because you're only quiet and not taking passive-aggressive jabs occasionally when something has you distracted, so what is it this time? I feel something putting life at great unease, like the world itself knows something horrible is about to be unleashed. Part of your current worries might be due to our link sharing the unease I can feel in the world attaching itself to and enhancing your woes. Though considering what you are worried about, at least half of it is your own legitimate concerns. That statement has me worried, Isabu, because anytime you voice your concern about something it usually ends up exploding into a nightmare. Damn it! Great! So thanks for putting me on edge, for Kami only knows how long till things finally explode. You're welcome, Rin. I could probably give you more if you would like. Was the giant turtle's remark. Nope, no thank you. Not until things finally blow over with what you just jinxed us with. And even then not for a few months after whatever is going to happen finally settles. Rin concluded her conversation with her mental roommate, for some reason getting the distinct impression that if she was looking at his face when Isabu made that last remark there would be a smug look on his face. Rin-chan, are you alright? A familiar voice said, bringing her back to reality completely. Rin jolted and looked around before her eyes settled on Obito, who asked the question that startled her. Yes, Obito-kun, I'm fine. I got distracted by my thoughts and Turtle started talking. Since the fight with the Kumo shinobi, Rin had told both Kakashi and Obito about her freeing Isabu in gratitude for his cooperation in helping take down Yujito, and him deciding that she was the first person in a long time that he believed to be deserving of his power. She told them the same story he had told her about the origin of the Biju and their purpose, as well as their fall from grace due to human being unable to view them as anything but monster. Kakashi was slightly wary that the Sandbai could theoretically break out at any time, probably due to bad memories from the Kyuubi attack only a few months ago, which Isabu admitted was entirely reasonable considering the damage and carnage caused by the fox. Even if the Biju had been set free from Kushina by a third party that possessed a Mangekyo Sharingan according to Minato sensei and sent on a rampage after being put under that person's power, Obito had made it clear that he trusted her decision no matter what it was. He only offered concerns that destroying the seal could make it easier for someone to extract Isabu from her. That had her concerned when she heard it, but Isabu assured her that she only destroyed the element that kept him prisoner, the elements that kept others from simply pulling them apart were kept intact. Rin relayed Isabu's assurances, which put his fears to rest. Since the resealing of the Nibi, Rin had come clean about to Jiraiya, Hiruzen, Hitomi, and Mikoto about the means she resorted to in order to be able to defeat Yujito. The looks of surprise on their faces was honestly the most hilarious thing she had seen since Kushina's death. It took a while to convince Jiraiya and Hiruzen that Isabu wasn't a threat, and was not the monster that countless had refused to believe that the Biju were anything but those monsters. Though when she got to telling everyone about what all Isabu told her about the Sage of Six Paths, Jiraiya looked as though he had heard some of it before, while some of it looked as though he was hearing it for the first time. When she asked about it, Jiraiya merely said he would talk later. Both Rin and Isabu were very interested in what Jiraiya had to say. Hopefully he would speak before he left Konoha. Concurrently in Konoha, Fugaku was feeling satisfied. Izayoi had finally gone and tried to order Fugaku to marry Itachi or Sasuke to Hayashi's daughter again, though this time he had been given fair warning in advance to the consequences for doing it again. Fugaku had originally never intended to follow through on that idea he had a few months ago, but what had just happened made him follow through on his threat. It had pretty much been like almost every other time the old fool had advised/ordered Fugaku to pressure Hayashi into agreeing to marry either Itachi or Sasuke to the girl who was only a month old. Fugaku had told him no and furthermore reminded Izayoi of his threat being carried out unless the man changed his tone. However, this time the man's reaction to being told no was far more volatile. He had demanded it be done or he would organize a mutiny against Fugaku and remove him from power, and then have it done. It took Fugaku a moment to register that the bastard had threatened violence and mutiny to see his demand accomplished. Then another to figure out why Izayoi wanted it done. He was in league with the other elders plotting the coup. He wanted to tie the Hyuga leadership to the Uchihas so they would hopefully support the revolt. Which brings him back to the now. So what will your answer be? Will you do it willingly or will I have to remove you from power? Izayoi questioned. Uchiha Izayoi, do you have any idea what you have just done? I had no desire to carry out my threat in letter rather than spirit, but you have just given me reason and cause to. Fugaku responded. What the hell are you talking about? The old Uchiha asked. You just threatened your clan head with mutiny and violence. Mutiny within a clan's leadership is allowed when there is the threat of the clan plotting against the village. However, your mutiny is plotted to rally both the Uchiha and Hyuga to rebellion against the village in hopes of achieving supremacy over it. You have just given me the authority to pass my own judgment. You shall be executed in front of the other elders to make an example out of you, Fugaku stated, killing intent radiating off of him slightly more with every few words. Izayoi quickly reached for something behind his back before Fugaku quickly grabbed a kunai and stabbed into the man's dominant arm, before breaking the man's other arm. Fugaku quickly pulled Izayoi's other arm to see what he was reaching for. What he found was no surprise. A dagger coated with snake venom which Fugaku recognized as being from the snakes that nested in the mushroom forests that surrounded Kusugakure. This was made to ensure death no matter how light the wound. Age and relying on surprise when the blade was not expected had dulled the once fierce ninja, and Fugaku had seen it coming the moment Izayoi threatened violence to depose Fugaku. Sito, get in here. Fugaku shouted to one of the guards. Yes, Fugaku-sama, what the hell? The man said. Izayoi was planning to incite mutiny for control of the clan and attempted to assassinate me. Have his chakra sealed and bring him to the clan's meeting hall, then have the other elders brought there alongside the rest of the clan. I'm ending this stupidity. Fugaku declared. As you wish, Fugaku-sama. The guard said before leaving with the battered old man to carry out his orders. The clan was assembled as asked within an hour. The only Uchiha who was missing was Obito for him having left the clan. Fugaku began to speak. I thank you all for coming on such short notice. Please leave questions till later to ensure this goes as quickly as possible. By now you probably have noticed Izayoi and his sorry state. He and half of our elders have been conspiring to rally our clan to rebellion against the village in hopes of establishing dominance over the entirety of Konoha. Izayoi had been ordering me to marry one of my sons to the daughter of Hyuga Hayashi, in hopes of using her to drive the clan to assist them in this coup. I had been refusing to carry out his demand out of respect for Hayashi and love for my sons, either of whom deserve having to be forced into a marriage at this age to appease the demands of senile old men who are still haunted by ghosts that have long since passed on. However, earlier today he once again demanded me to arrange the marriage. When I refused him, Izayoi demanded that I do it or else he would have me removed, with or without violence, and have it done himself. When I explained the error of his statement, he reached for a poisoned dagger he held on his person to assassinate me. I stopped him and had his ability to mold chakra removed. The dagger was coated with the venom from Kusa's infamous mushroom shadow snake, the poison of which is lethal and highly damaging to the body. Izayoi has been interrogated while I awaited you all to arrive, and he has confessed his intentions. This is not a trial, this is judgment. This is an example being made. Fugaku turned to Izayoi. You knew the consequences of ordering me on how to run this clan the last time you tried to command me. Do you have any last words? The man only shot a look of venom at Fugaku before going to say something that was most likely meant to incite rebellion. However, before the words even left his mouth, his throat was slashed by Fugaku, ending the elder's life. Fugaku turned to the elders who had attempted to incite rebellion before. Izayoi is an example of what happens when you overstep the authority your position allows. The purpose of the elders is to use their experience to advise the clan head on how to best lead the clan. You would do well to remember that unless you wish to share his fate. He then dismissed everyone before moving towards Mikoto, who had Sasuke in her arms and Itachi at her side. 2 months later, the countryside within the land of Tea. How the hell did I end up in this mess? Was the thought that circled in Obito's mind as he stared down a Kirin not much older than himself. What had happened was that Kakashi and Obito had been assigned to guard a noble who was visiting friends in the land of Tea. No major trouble was expected, but they were assigned due to the noble himself being a relatively high-value target to bandits, and on the off-chance shinobi from other villages were sent after the man. The bandits were easy to deal with whenever they did attack, barely worth the effort. They welcomed the easy low-risk fights after Yujito's infiltration. They made it to the man's destination in relatively good time without too many distractions. However, the return trip was where everything went to hell. First off, he refused to get instantly brought back to Konoha, said he wanted a chance to enjoy this country's scenery. That proved to be a horrible mistake. It left them vulnerable to additional attacks and any attacks by enemy shinobi should they come. Well, they did indeed come. 2 Kirin had been sent after Obito and Kakashi's client, apparently hired by one or more of the noble's rivals to kill him, however not expecting that the man would have hired jonins. The moment that their intent had become apparent, Obito grabbed the client and pulled him into the Kamui world. Kakashi recognized the elder of the pair from the bingo book apparently, and moved in a way to indicate he would take that one. That was just fine with Obito. He also just barely noticed Kakashi covering his Sharingan after having it uncovered to respond to the initial attack. However, Obito realized that there was more to the story when the opponent yelled out upon recognizing who Kakashi was. This was something personal for the Kirin, while for Kakashi it was just another opponent, but he had every intention of using that unbalanced anger to take his opponent down. Then Obito took a moment to look at his opponent for any obvious signs of anything he could use to formulate a general plan of how to take on his opponent. The boy was barely older than Kakashi and Obito, but he carried himself like war veterans who had seen multiple wars. However, Obito noticed the sword that the boy carried at his side and recognized it as one used by a 7 swordsman hopeful, usually designed after the sword they hopped to one-day use. But Obito was more interested in the jutsu he would most likely know, ninja art, hidden mist jutsu, and he might have some unique water release jutsu. He obviously hadn't put together that Obito was an Uchiha, or else he would be more cautious in his stance. He also hadn't figured out that Kakashi had placed a small genjutsu on him that screwed with his ability to recognize certain things. Most usefully, this could be used to throw off an opponent's ability to identify the Sharingan. Kakashi had given Obito a bone while he had his Sharingan uncovered. Kakashi did know just how bad Obito wanted that particular jutsu and figured this would be the opponent who would most likely have it. This genjutsu made it a hell of a lot easier to copy jutsu off an opponent who did not believe there was a reason to be worried about their jutsu being copied. The fight began with attacker flying through hand signs. Obito's Sharingan finished predicting his movements before he began attacking. He's opening with water bullet, probably to distract from his real opening move. More than likely he's trying to distract me from his real move. Water release, water bullet. The attack came and Obito quickly avoided it, but then another barrage of water bullets came from the left, and just about made contact with him. He made a clone to attack as well. The barrage from in front was more powerful than the one that tried to blindside me, so I'm guessing he used a water clone and the one I'm facing is the real one. Obito quickly flew through hand signs before screaming. Fire release, great fireball jutsu, spewing a fireball towards the one he assumed was the clone. The attack made contact, and the clones splattered from the attack. Why don't I simply implant a suggestion to use the jutsu, copy it, grab Kakashi, and warp out of here? Okay, just make sure it is subtle enough for him to not question it. Obito thought as he placed the suggestion into his opponent's head with his Sharingan. Ninja art, hidden mist jutsu. It worked. Haha, I got it. Obito ran through hand signs to cover his escape. Ninja art, hidden mist jutsu. You copied me? His opponent screamed, not knowing that his opponent had already escaped. Kakashi was in the middle of hiding from his opponent when Obito appeared next to him. Kakashi, I got the jutsu, we're getting out of here. Alright, was the laconic response. They were back home in a moment. However, Rin looked like she was being seriously bothered by something. What's wrong, Rin-chan? Obito asked. Rin responded. Something is happening, Obito-kun, something that is spooking Isabu. He isn't making sense. Occasionally he's muttering things that has me terrified. He's saying his father's power has returned. He's asking why that power is being used like this, and I have no idea why he is saying that. Land of Rain 2 hours later. I must admit, I don't know how you managed to separate me from my men, but you must be skilled if you did so without me noticing," one figure said, wearing a poncho and the uniform of Amigekyo with a breather mask. "We had helped to set this event in place, but we have been planning this for a while." A woman wearing a black cloak with red clouds on it with a straw hat on her head covering her face in shadows. "All right then, you seem to know who you're dealing with seeing as you sent 7 of you." "Who are you?" the first man asked again. "Do you recognize us?" the one at front of the group asked before pulling his hat off but keeping his eyes shut. The woman also removed her hat but stared at their opponent. "You two are Yahiko and Konan, the two from that Akatsuki group I dealt with a few years ago." "How are you still alive?" the man asked. "You are right, Hanzo. Yahiko did die. He killed himself using the kunai you gave me to save Konan. And I died as well that moment. I had been known as Uzumaki Nagato, and from that moment I, Pain, was born. I am a god of peace who will tear down the shinobi world that tears itself apart in the name of vengeance, just as I will kill you to avenge my friend and to end your tyranny over Amigekyo and the land of rain. I will strike the pain of loss deep into this world. All will know the same pain and they shall throw away the concept of war. I will end the cycle of hatred and vengeance, and it starts here today with your death," Pain declared as he opened his eyes showing the rippled, purple designed. Bold words coming from a walking corpse. "So who are the rest of these soon-to-be corpses?" Hanzo asked. At the moment, the other 5 removed their hats and opened their eyes. They were all the same rippled, purple design. Pain answered alongside the other men as one. "We are the power of the Sage of 6 Paths reborn. We are the 6 Paths of Pain, and we shall be the end of you, Hanzo the Salamander." A battle to determine the fate aim and the land of rain was about to begin, and the result would determine the course of the elemental nations for the next few decades. Chapter 5: The Dawning Fate of Amigekyo. Land of Rain. "We are the power of the Sage of 6 Paths reborn. We are the 6 Paths of Pain, and we shall be the end of you, Hanzo the Salamander." That one declaration, given by the self-proclaimed god of peace Pain, had marked the beginning of a battle that had been in the making ever since Hanzo had been manipulated into attacking the original Akatsuki by Danzo. A man who feared Akatsuki taking power in AIM because they were new, and therefore highly unknown and unpredictable, thus conspiring with Hanzo to destroy their growing influence, and keep a paranoid old tyrant in power because he was predictable compared to the young and new peace organization. Danzo was going to be one of my targets after we finished with Hanzo, but it appears that the naive Konoha grew up and realized his treachery before he could spread more of his poison. Pain thought as his mind raced as his bodies entered their stances, each designed with their strengths and weaknesses in mind. Months of planning, training, and coordination made today even possible. Zetsu creating a false Hanzo to trick the men he was leading. Moyo trapping Hanzo with a false scenery genjutsu, to make him unaware of his men's absence. Madara planting the suggestion to come here after a note had been left in Hanzo's office a week ago. All had led to this battle. Pain took the first attack. "Let us begin!" With the command, the Azura, animal, and human paths began their offensives. The soul reading and extracting human path rushing in for a taijutsu clash, the mechanical and puppet-like Azura path firing off missiles to cover it, and the summoning master animal path retreating some distance back to begin summoning the creatures tied to it. Konan was hanging back to cover Pain should Hanzo bypass the initial offensive. Her primary role was to ensure that Hanzo couldn't take control of the battle by destroying the Naraka path, while capitalizing on any openings Pain managed to create. Should she fail, any chance of victory would be snatched from them by the jaws of most likely certain defeat. That left the chakra-absorbing Preta path, the gravity-controlling Deva path, and the healer of the 6 paths as well as the controller of the King of Hell Summon, the Naraka path. The strategy was planned for ensuring Hanzo could not gain enough of an advantage to begin forcing the remnant of Yahiko's Akatsuki to fight on his terms. The Akatsuki duo would have not required such a strategy to fight most opponents, but Hanzo was not most opponents. He may be past his prime, but he never let his training slip and continued to improve. There was no telling what he had created since his legendary battle against the Sannin. "Yahiko, watch over us. Because you shall be avenged, and your dream of peace shall be carried on starting today." Pain thought as his mind raced to predict how Hanzo would respond to the attack and how the Rinnegan bearer would respond. The animal path reached what Pain had deemed a safe distance, and initiated the summoning jutsu to begin bringing forth the summons that were vital to the plan. as the human path met Hanzo in the middle of their mutual charge, but before it could make contact, Hanzo swiped with the blade of his Kusarigama and took the right hand off the human path before smashing the chained weight of his weapon into the corpse puppet's face. The human path is down. That blow destroyed its brain. It will need to be repaired by the Naraka path in order for it to be reactivated, and considering the uses of the path's ability to control souls, it will be a good idea. And even then, reactivating the path would at least give me a meat shield to sacrifice to protect a more vital path. Pain thought as Hanzo began rushing towards his Deva, Azura, Preta, and Naraka paths after moving past the corpse of the human path and avoided the Azura path's missile attack. Pain realized Hanzo was rushing the Deva path and quickly reacted by issuing mental orders. Azura path, intercept him. Naraka path, repair the human path, which the mechanical Pain responded by getting in front to block the charge, and the Naraka path responded by quietly moving towards the corpse of the fallen path. Hanzo swung his blade intending to take the head of the Azura path before following up by beheading the one who he believed was the leader. His surprise was made very clear when the Azura path grabbed the blade and was not sliced apart. Hanzo tried to remove his blade from the grip of the puppet-like path, but it refused to give any ground. Hanzo attempted to break the new stalemate by smashing the weighted end of the chain attached to his Kusarigama against the Azura path's head, only for the mechanical path to simply take the blow and shrug it off, with a clear dent put into the side of the path's head, but the damage was slowly fixing itself. By this point, the Naraka path had finished repairing the human path's brain and right hand. Then Pain reactivated the corpse puppet, which slunk towards the encounter between Hanzo and the Azura path, in hopes of being able to land a cheap blow that could help speed the fight along before it became a war of attrition. Pain began to move his Deva path's hand to aim an attack to push Hanzo to the human path, having the Azura path release its grip on Hanzo's weapon, and then unleashing his attack. Shinra Tensei. Hanzo's eyes went surprised as he felt gravity swap to pushing him away from his attacker. However, his instincts warned him of a sneak attack, and he quickly grabbed a kunai and threw it towards the human path, which was approaching him from behind. The corpse puppet was able to respond in time due to the linked sight of the 6 paths and got out of the way, unsure if it had the strength to deflect Hanzo's thrown kunai. Hanzo was sent flying backwards a great distance. Conan decided to attack while Hanzo was preoccupied by his impromptu flight. Paper shuriken! Sending multiple paper projectiles in the shape of shuriken at Hanzo, who was able to destroy all but 2 which made contact and drew blood. They however only dealt flesh wounds. Then Hanzo collided with a cliff in the outer part of the area where this fight was taking place, ending the gravity swap that had been inflicted upon him. Pain began counting mentally the duration until he could use the Deva Path's abilities again. While also thinking about the fight so far, Conan managed to do more with her paper shuriken than I was expecting, but it appears to have been little more than a flesh wound. But it appears the shockwaves from both the Azura Path's initial attack as well as his collision with that cliff has at least caused some damage to him. I know I killed that one, Hanzo began, referring to the human path, before continuing. So I believe that is safe to assume that one of your little assassins possesses an unprecedented level of medical ninjutsu that would put even Senju Tsunade to shame. Based on the now intact assassin, I believe that the one who possesses the capability is able to fully reattach and rehabilitate severed limbs in seconds, as well as lethal damage, up to and including severe brain damage. Perhaps those eyes of yours truly are the Rinnegan. Perhaps there is truth to your claim. You have proven that there is some credibility to you 6 paths of pain. I will remember the time I dueled and killed the Rinnegan bearer and his followers. Pain kept his outward calm whilst mildly panicking in his mind. This is bad. If he figures out which one is the Naraka path and he destroys it, we will be in a tight situation. I would have to summon its remains to my real body and then repair, before resummoning it with the animal path, costing time and energy. We need to prevent him from figuring it out. Pain racked his brain for ideas on how to quickly end the fight before Hanzo took away any chance for victory, before he came up with one. It's risky, but if we can put him where the Deva path can push or pull him into a position where I can bring him towards the human path, we can end the fight by extracting his soul. It would rely on chance and Hanzo not catching on till it is too late. I will need for the Deva path to be fully recharged before we can end this. The animal path summoned 2 of the creatures tied to it. I can work with just them. Animal path, cease summoning and bring the 2 summons that were summoned here. Preta path, charge Hanzo. Azura path, prepare to attack. Human path, go to the Deva path. Naraka path, go towards Conan. No sooner than when the paths began carrying out their orders did Hanzo begin his own attack. But this has gone on long enough, before beginning to rapidly form a massive set of hand seals. Pain's dojutsu slowed down the image long enough to recognize seals in the sequence. His eyes went wide when he recognized which jutsu he had seen whose sequence were contained within Hanzo's attack. That sequence contains the sequence used in the Great Fire Dragon Stream as well as some other strong fire release techniques. Whatever this one is, it is going to be massive considering the number of seals he is going through. The Preta path doesn't have enough time to reach him and drain out his chakra, and even if it could reach him in time, there's no certainty that the Preta path could actually drain enough chakra to stop or weaken the attack. I have to defend in order to keep my plan on track. Konan, the Naraka path, the animal path and its summons are probably out of the range for this jutsu, whatever it is. I need to protect my other path's Preta path, break off charge and prepare to unleash the absorption barrier. As the chakra-absorbing path began to carry out Pain's newest mental order, he issued one to the Azura path. Attack! Azura path missile. The path did as ordered and raised its right arm and fired off the armament hidden within its arm. However, Hanzo did nothing to avoid the attack as it approached, nor did he even make a move to eliminate the incoming projectile. He's confident that whatever his next move is going to be that it will stop my attack. The moment of truth is here, he's getting ready to unleash it. Pain thought as Hanzo reached the end of his sequence. Fire release, burning breath of the salamander. With the shout, Hanzo breathed out a massive fireball that went roaring towards the four paths, consuming the missile that the walking arsenal known as the Azura path had launched. The heavy-set Preta path moved to the front of the group and said, Preta path, chakra absorption barrier, as the fireball neared and the path began absorbing the chakra out of the attack. As this occurred, the Naraka path reached Konan and she asked, Has there been a change to the plan? The path nodded. He has figured out the Naraka path's abilities. We need to end him before he figures out which one it is and destroys the body. This fight needs to be ended as fast as possible. Even faster than the original plan had entailed. We need to get him into a position where the human path can extract Hanzo's soul. Konan nodded before she said something else. That flame Hanzo is breathing looks awfully strange. I wonder why. Pain's Naraka path was silent for a moment, as Pain was analyzing the visual information of the paths who had better views, before he responded. It doesn't appear to be a standard fire release technique, and it seems to be newly developed and in the middle of refinement for easier use in tight situations. We must have pushed him to use it, though the original plan accounted for him summoning abuse, rather than using a newly developed technique. Though it seems that this technique has been tested before. Though considering how many seals he ran through, he had to have only used it with the distance my Shinra Tensei put between us. Konan nodded before going to attention. Hanzo is starting to stop the attack. What do I need to do? The Naraka path looked her in the eye before responding. Converge with the rest of the paths. We need all of us attacking to set up the final blow. With that, the path and Konan rushed forward, intending to finish the fight as soon as possible. From the eyes of the Deva path, the massive attack had finally ended. Most of the paths were untouched by the attack. Only the cloaks worn by the Preta and Azura path were damaged by the attack, with the Azura path's cloak being completely destroyed and the Preta path's being somewhat singed. Hanzo only expressed his surprise at the apparently still living bodies with only a single sentence. So you haven't been burned to cinders by that attack? A statement rather than a question. However, before he could attack, a massive appendage swung out and swiped him, hurling him before he could respond due to both surprise and exhaustion. When Hanzo recovered his bearings, he saw a giant chameleon, bearing Rinnegan's in its eyes, a snake head at the tip of its tail, and a tentacle on its back with a similar piercing to the paths through the tentacle, standing near where he himself was moments ago. Then a giant lobster creature, with Rinnegan-like eyes and a piercing as well, crawled into Hanzo's periphery with the missing assassin who disappeared at the start of the battle standing on its head. All the paths, the two animal path summons, and Konan all converged into a single group before rushing at the salamander. Hanzo responded, determined to take down this fledgling Akatsuki. Ninja art, explosive circle, Hanzo yelled after he threw the disc lined with explosive notes, and made a single sign, arming the explosive tags. However, Konan responded with a few hand signs of her own before naming her out counter. Origami release, command of the Shikigami. With those words, the explosive tag circle halted its movement before the tags removed themselves from the circle and flew towards Hanzo, exploding once the tags were close enough. However, Hanzo rushed through the clouds kicked up by the explosions before continuing towards the group. When the two sides converged, a melee ensued. Most of the paths and Konan attacking Hanzo. Only the human path was completely uninvolved in the taijutsu clash. The Deva path was involved, but only at the bare minimum to set up the hopeful outcome. Fist clashed with fist, and chakra receiver rods being used as swords along with origami release enhanced paper swords clashed with Kuzurigama, either gaining a clear advantage. However, Hanzo took a swipe at Konan at a moment where she had no opportunity to pull entirely out of the way. She winced, expecting to feel a sharp pain and a noticeable lack of weight on her right arm, but when she looked at her arm, only to find it completely detached as expected but made of paper rather than meat and blood. She looked at the arm still attached and noticed the same thing before noticing that the entirety of her body was in a paper-like state. She issued a hand sign and the paper making up her right arm dispersed before reattaching to the rest of her body, completing her right arm. Like it had never been removed at all. Hanzo looked more surprised than angry. I was not expecting to ever see an origami release user ever again after their complete, or should I say near complete, annihilation in between the first and second Great Ninja Wars. But today has been full of things I thought I would never see. I also thought I would never see one perform the dance of the Shikigami again before I enter the pure world. Papers swirled and obeyed Konan's commands completely and began to slash and swipe at Hanzo. All the while extra paper formed up on her back and formed wings. And the brawl continued once more, with Konan attacking with far more power now that her new power had manifested. A while and a good many landed blows both on the Akatsukis and Hanzo. Later, the finishing moment drew near. Jutsu had been thrown and both sides knew that they needed to end it soon, feeling the drain on their chakra. Hanzo slashed at the animal path only for the summoned lobster creature it stood on to grasp the blade of his Kuzurigama tightly with its claw. Hanzo fought to free his weapon when movement in the corner of his eye caused him to move to avoid an attack. Hanzo released his grip on his weapon when the snake head of the chameleon lunged at his hand looking to bite him. And that gave the Deva path Pain, who stood behind Hanzo from a fair distance back, the opportunity he needed. Pain aimed his hand and uttered his attack's name softly. Bansho Tenin. With those words, Hanzo was pulled towards the Deva path and by extension the human path, which had slipped into position unnoticed thanks to the chaos. Hanzo was powerless to stop thanks to his injuries acquired during the fight and the melee and the loss of his weapon. Feeling a wrong sensation when the human path's open hands made contact with him before pulling away to reveal a green orb, and with it, Hanzo's life was taken away from him. Hanzo the Salamander, who stalemated even the legendary Sannin and dubbed them that for being able to hold the line against him, had perished. However, in those moments that Pain clutched the soul of his enemy, he saw everything that filled Hanzo's memories, of how a man who dreamed of peace in the elemental nations fell and became a paranoid tyrant. Eventually Pain let go, allowing the soul to move on to the next world. Konan asked, "What shall we do with the body?" Pain responded from the Deva path. "Bury him alongside the honored dead of AIM. He has more than earned that much, even if he fell from grace and became that monster we had to kill." Konan nodded, uneasy about Hanzo receiving such honors, but was willing to go along with it if Pain believed it was warranted. Moving on from that, Konan asked, "What shall we do now?" Pain responded, "Announce Hanzo's death to the men he brought with him, earn their loyalty and trust, and have them head back to AIM. Then we will regroup with Shigeru, rest a day, get my real body inside of AIM, and finally make the announcement." Konan nodded, but a question nagged both of their minds. Why on earth was that fight so easy? But a simple look from each other communicated that both of them thought it, but neither had an answer. Konan cleared the silence. "Nagato, thank you. Thank you for helping me get revenge for our friend." Pain nodded. "I told you that there was no need to worry, Yahiko was my friend as well." Konan nodded before she and the rest of the paths walked off, ready to begin the plan to bring peace to the world. Land of Fire Konoha, following the conclusion of the battle, and Rin took in a deep breath and let it out in relief. She had no idea what exactly caused Isabu to go into, whatever it was, but she definitely didn't want it to happen again. His moaning and delirious rambling frightened her. The things he was saying in his delirium inspired great amount of terror in her due to his story about being created by the Sage of Six Paths, and begging for an answer on why his father's power was being used for whatever. However, what shook her more was the clear suffering of someone close to her that she could hear, but due to his condition, she was unable to communicate herself to him nor try to comfort him and ease whatever he was going through. It was looking at a loved one suffering and hearing their pain and being unable to comfort them. The thought of having to look on at it powerlessly again was a hell she hoped to never experience. But whatever had happened was over. Aisabu was quiet, but she doubted he was in any condition to talk. More than likely he would need rest and time, or else he could be sent spiraling back into another episode. Rin had decided to wait till everyone else had gone to sleep and she had gotten Naruto to settle down and go to sleep. Her mind had started wondering if the Kyuubi or Nibi within Naruto and Hinata respectively had gone through similar events that Aisabu had just finished going through. But then her mind started backing up and getting a view from a higher vantage point, wondering if the other Biju had similar breakdowns and if their Jinchurikis at least cared about their Biju's well-being. Obito seemed to be somewhat worried with her sudden drop in demeanor a few hours ago. She felt a little guilty when she found out that after their little conversation earlier, Obito had taken up her supper duty for the night. She hoped Kakashi wouldn't be waking up in the middle of the night for impromptu bathroom visits, for any reason. He claimed it was better than Obito's usual bad cooking, but still not good. By the time Rin got around to eating her leftovers, and found Kakashi's claim to be correct, Obito's cooking had definitely improved over the last 3 years. But he still had a long way to go before he could make a meal that could be served without needing to ensure a bathroom was nearby. But any further thought was cut off by her roommate returning to consciousness. Ugh. Aisabu, are you alright? Rin asked, concerned about her partner. Better now, yes. How long was I unconscious? About 4 hours, and you weren't unconscious, you were delirious and spouting out a bunch of nonsense. Which I might add, if any of it is serious, I would be absolutely terrified. No, this is not good. Whatever triggered my episode was something that is to be cautious of. What did I say? You were saying a lot of things, but most notably you were begging your father for an answer on why his power was being used for this, whatever it was. Aisabu's moaning went completely quiet before he gasped out a response. What? It was quiet for almost a minute afterwards before Rin sat down on the futon she had in her room and began meditating, entering into the place created inside the seal where Aisabu stayed. The turtle looked as though he was panicking and questioning a lot of things. Hey Aisabu, don't start another panic attack. Try to stay focused, Rin said, fearing what might happen if his thoughts reached the wrong right. I'm just worried about some things. Don't keep me in the dark, try to talk to me. Remember, whatever happens, we're in it together. I remember. Rin smiled before continuing. Alright. Now, to put my fears to rest and to answer a question that we will be asked soon, what happened? You said I went delirious? If I went into a delirious state, it can only mean a few things, and that I'm close enough to be affected that badly by one of them. And none of the possibilities are good. Like your father's power returning and being used for a purpose that taints it? Rin asked, taking a shot based on her partner's rambling. That is my assumption, yes. So, what is the plan? Rin asked. For now, keep our ears to the ground for any suspicious-sounding news and redouble certain training efforts. We'll figure out anything else we can do later. Sounds good to me. See ya tomorrow, ISO. Rin said as she turned to leave before trailing off and stopping in her tracks. What's wrong? Do you think that the Kyuubi and Nibi underwent something similar? Rin asked, face filled with terror. No, I don't think they did. They're freshly sealed with extremely powerful sealing arrays. I doubt either of their minds will be active again for quite some time. It may be years, but they will reawaken before a decade and a half has passed. Rin let out a sigh of relief before continuing. That is a relief! See ya tomorrow, Aisabu. With that, Rin left the mindscape and soon fell asleep with her mind put at ease. However, Aisabu remained and sighed in contempt at himself. I'm sorry, Rin, but this needs to be kept secret for now. The turtle bitterly thought to himself it hurt to lie, if only by omission, to her after she began treating him like an equal rather than a piece of property. But the new circumstances called for a new approach. Especially after what she had just told him about his delirium. He was begging his father for an answer on why his power had returned yet was being misused. There was only one thing that could likely trigger that response. Someone had gained the Rinnegan and had unleashed its hour with Aisabu had been planning on gradually exposing Rin to more and more of his chakra over the course of years to have her develop stronger tolerances towards the power. The whole reason he infused a part of his chakra into her system was to accelerate her natural growth, as well as her growing tolerance to higher concentrations of his power over extended periods of exposure. The idea was to gradually strengthen Rin until she was ready to seek out the temple that Hagoromo had left behind after gaining some measure of control over the Jubi's power. Isabu never heard of an exact location, but he had heard enough about the surrounding landscape of the temple to infer a few possibilities of where it could be. The most likely guess was the back of Genbu, the island turtle and one of the eldest beings alive, who was infamous for being extremely tricky to find. Though considering that Matatabi's previous Jinchuriki and Gyuki's current Jinchuriki both held the ability to fully transform into their partners, perhaps their village knew where to find Genbu. Perhaps they had used the information left behind by Hagoromo detailing what he did to safely harness and control the Jubi's chakra to create a method for a Jinchuriki of one of the 9 Biju to gain complete control over their Biju. I doubt they would be willing to share that information with us unless Rin defected to Kumo. And when they find out about Yujito's death and Matatabi's removal, they will be even more unlikely to ally and share the information. Unless something drastic happens, we aren't getting their information nor access to Genbu if they know where he is. Isabu was more than capable enough to get Rin to the standard perfect Jinchuriki, able to harness their Biju's power without being influenced. But it wouldn't hurt to try to figure out how they managed to. Perhaps Matatabi would be willing to share if asked when her mind reawakened from being sealed. However, back to the part that he would be able to do his own, Isabu's thoughts turned towards the time crunch that now stood before him and Rin. Isabu had hoped to be able to take his time in getting her there, but the sensing of the events of today showed him that time was not on their side, forcing him to speed up his timetable. If the calculation Isabu did concerning his accelerated timetable was correct, Rin would achieve a complete mastery of the version 1 and version 2 cloak within 8 years, and a full mastery of the near-release state not too long after. Only time would tell if things would go as planned, but he had faith that it would. It may not be perfect, but it would do for now. Though I dread the day when not perfect will not do. The land of rain within Amigekyo. 4 days later, the people of the rain village had sensed an aura of sheer dread ever since Hanzo's men returned from their excursion a few days ago. While that had some at ease for a while due to having the living families together, it soon gave way to a realization everyone became aware of and had even greater dread or outright fear due to. No one had seen nor heard anything from or about Hanzo ever since his men had returned late at night after everyone but guards and sentries had gone to sleep, with Hanzo among them supposedly. Everyone was scared, but no one quite agreed on what it could be. However, the summons given to every citizen of Amigekyo to assemble at the foot of Hanzo's tower gave rise to even greater dread at what could be getting ready to happen. Once everyone assembled and was sorted into positions where they could see whoever would be speaking from the balcony that served as the stand where either Hanzo or one of his commanders would give speeches when necessary or impart important news. But to everyone's surprise, when the door opened, it wasn't Hanzo and a few guards who emerged. It was an orange-headed man and a light blue-headed woman, both wearing black cloaks adorned with red clouds. Then, to everyone's collective horror, the man held up his hand to reveal what he held in it, Hanzo's Kuzurigama, clearly recognizable as Hanzo's due to the almost harpoon-like design of the blade. People of Amigekyo, allow me to introduce my partner as well as myself. This is Conan, my right hand, and I am Pain, the god of peace that this world desperately needs. To accentuate his point, Pain opened his eyes, which had been held shut until now, and the people took a collective gasp of shock as they recognized his dojutsu, the Rinnegan, the eyes of the Sage of Six Paths. Maybe his claims of being a god weren't as far-fetched as they seemed. As you can see, I hold in my Hanzo's favorite Kuzurigama. I have no need for such a weapon, but it serves its purpose in bringing your attention to me. To answer the question of why I have it, the answer is quite simple. Conan and I battled him and we killed Hanzo the Salamander. The stunned silence was the only response they had for Pain. I call myself a god of peace because it is my goal to end the cycle of hatred and vengeance that tears apart this shinobi world. I was born in this land and saw how it was damaged and defiled by the chaos of the Second Great Ninja War. How the great villages are willing to wage war on one another, but it is the people and lands of the minor villages that ultimately suffer the worst. The simple solution would be to kill the Gakage and assume their authority. But to kill them would bring forth the cycle of vengeance. Whenever someone kills someone, they inevitably kill someone's friend or loved one. Vengeance is desired by the grieving and they reap it by taking the lives of those who stole their loved ones' lives from them. This cycle continues endlessly and pointlessly. Even Conan and I are not immune to this. We sought Hanzo's death in the name of revenge because he stole the life of someone we loved, all because my dear friend desired peace and it threatened Hanzo's power as a dictator. But it was through that suffering that I realized that the best way to honor my fallen friend was to take up his dream of peace. That day Hanzo forced me to end my friend's life, killed the boy I once was and gave birth to Pain, who sought to bring peace no matter what. Pain elaborated. My ancestor, the father of ninjutsu and the legendary bearer of the eyes I possess, believed that the key to peace was by everyone understanding one another. This is foolishly idealistic, but not without a grain of truth. If people can understand the pain that war causes to everyone, then they will abandon it to avoid causing more suffering that they now understand in everyone. To do this, I would have to strike at the heart of this shinobi world with such force and power that no one will ever think about lifting a weapon or molding a jutsu in the name of waging war ever again. However, humanity has often forgotten vital lessons it has learned and needed to be reminded of from time to time, like a child. To that end, I would have to strike against this world with such ferocity that none shall ever forget. I will not ask you to be part of my direct plan to accomplish this, but I will ask, will you stand with me and help see this world of peace made a reality? Pain asked the audience. We'll follow you wherever you choose to lead us, Pain-sama, cried one of the ninjas before the rest of Amigakure joined in the cry. Then all I ask of you is to go on under the ruse that Hanzo lives and act as though our pacts with the other villages stand, while using this opportunity to gather what we need to make true allies and strike against our unsuspecting enemies. I will ask no more from you than I would have from myself or Conan, nor will I demand that any of you dishonor yourselves for the sake of my plans. Unlike Hanzo, who lost his way and lost sight of his obligations to you, the people he was sworn to protect and serve, I know well enough of my immediate obligations. Pain declared. The cries of approval became much more unified and louder. Then let this day be known in records of history as the end of the winter Hanzo allowed to decimate AIM for so long, and the winter that has decimated the elemental nations, and let the spring that shall save it begin with the rising dawn. Pain declared before making several hand signs before muttering something that no one else heard. Everyone felt the pulse of chakra. Pain let off. With chakra that powerful, it was little wonder that this man managed to topple Hanzo the salamander. But everyone went breathless when the rain that the land of rain was known for began to slow and eventually stopped altogether. Then the clouds parted and showed the morning sky, with the sun peeking through the cover and creating the visual of red clouds, just like the one that adorned the cloaks of Pain-sama and Conan-sama. Pain declared alongside Conan, "This is the beginning of the Akatsuki. Those who shall bring about this new dawn by gathering the 9 Jinchuriki." However, one particular shinobi was less than thrilled by all this, and the only thought that circled in his head was one of panic. They will want to hear about this. He was already due to send a report, but something this big couldn't be written down and sent with a messenger. He had to head to the rendezvous point. Luckily, he had the perfect excuse to get out of AIM and head for the border town. Both of his primary employers would meet him there and figure out a plan before this Pain character took complete control. And so he left Amigakure. Fear of Pain driving him, while belief that he was doing the right thing drove him to temporarily flee the village he was born in to secure a meeting with those who would see to Pain's inevitable war being stopped before it could be begun. Chapter 6: Crying Clouds, Warnings of a Dawning Day. The land of lightning. Kumogakure. The day of Pain's speech to Amigakure to the civilians who lived in this great village as well as the rest of the country, everything seemed to be alright. However, the top members of the village's leadership were scrambling to figure out the reason behind Yujito's disappearance. Some were scarred that she might have defected, though they were quickly silenced by both the ruling Raikage A and his little brother Killer B. Both knew her well enough to know that she loved the village and that she would commit seppuku before she would betray it. Other theories floated around, but none were likely. The storm release bearers were starting to get concerned about one of their own, Marui, who had disappeared at about the same time. However, everyone was starting to notice Shimo Hideki becoming scarcer these days. It was late at night when the members of the Raikage's residence were disturbed by a village guard running in. "Raikage-sama! There goes the chance to sleep till the morning." The fourth Raikage grumbled before getting up to see what it could possibly be. "What is it?" the large man asked his much smaller subordinate. "Sir, Marui has returned and he has a message for you," the man said, with Killer B walking in to hear just that. "Yo, bro. You think he might know where is Yujito?" Killer B said. He had started picking up the habit of rapping his every sentence back in his childhood, but Yujito's disappearance had started to wear on him, causing him to only say a few rhymes in his sentences every now and then. "I don't know, B, but if he does, I wanted to know 3 months ago when it happened. Have him brought to my office," I responded. "Yes, sir." A few minutes later, the Raikage B and Marui were gathered in A's office with a few other key members of Kumo's command structure, including Shimo Hideki. Marui told them what he did know, which wasn't much as his mind had been wiped by a Yamanaka. He was told as much by the guy who dumped him not too far away from the village entrance. He said that I was allowed to live as a warning, that Konoha would not tolerate another incident like what had happened. But he gave me a letter and told me to only open it with you in the room, Marui said as he handed the letter to the Reikage. A sensor in the room checked the letter for any traps such as explosives, but found no evidence of any and handed the letter to the Reikage to be opened. The large man opened it to find a sealing array that immediately activated. Everyone jumped to attention, prepared for the worst. But they failed to prepare for what they did see. A pile of 4 corpses. Each with a different cause of death. J, a decorated member of Kumo's ANBU, pulled apart into 6 separate pieces. Z, another member of Kumo's ANBU, a chunk of meat missing at the chest where his heart and lungs should be. Sito, a deep black ops agent with a near spotless record, a stab wound from a sword through his heart. However, the worst one was the final one, the missing Nai Yujito with her once fair skin now dried and shriveled, with her cause of death revealed by her open shirt. The seal that contained the Nibi within her was ruined. The Nibi had been extracted. The collective room went silent after noticing the paper that was attached to Yujito. A grabbed and read it, and then his anger exploded, with his lightning armor snapping on and the man dashing for Shumo Hideki who stood in the edge of the room. He grasped him by his neck and screeched at him. "You wrinkled bastard! I ordered you to stay away from the Uzumaki child. I told you that we could bide our time and maybe grab him when we try to obtain a Hyuga as well. But because of your desire to avenge your son and your family honor, you have cost us any chance of infiltrating Konoha. Not only that, you coerced Yujito into going and now Nibi is sealed into a new Jinchuriki. That is not under our command, you just handed her over to Konoha. Nibi is now in enemy hands as their asset, and if the cat decides to tell them anything she was aware of, we're fucked, and we don't know what all she knew. And we cannot force them to hand the cat back over cause of this. We're fucked, and it is all your fault. Do you have anything to say?" The whole room went silent at the information the Reikage just screamed. Shumo responded, "Everything I did was for the good of Kumo. This was a regrettable outcome, and I apologize, but I will fix it." With that statement, the Reikage's temper was seemingly sated. The lightning armor had dispelled, but A's grip on the man's throat had not been removed. But Killer B saw the look in his elder brother's eyes at that statement. He may have seemed outwardly calm, but on the inside he was anything but. I responded, "Apology accepted, and I know just how you're going to fix this, with your immediate execution." The elder's eyes went wide with surprise before the Reikage put every last bit of strength he had into his grip. The sickening crunch that followed ended the deceptive elder's life, but it would not bring back those whose lives had been extinguished in the pursuit of his vendetta. However, despair had begun to brew within the Hachibi Jinchuriki's mind over the loss of a friend. His partner, the mighty Hachibi, the eight-tailed ox, sensed B's growing sadness and despair and tried to comfort him. However, the Biju was shocked by his host's preemptive response. "I know what you're probably getting ready to say, but please don't say it right now, Gyuki. I just need time." What shocked Gyuki the absolute most was B's use of the Hachibi's name. He almost never used it due to his insistence on constantly rapping his sentences, whether it was spoken out loud or in thought to Gyuki, due to lacking rhyming potential for lyrics. If anything, it sounded like B had quite a bit of the enthusiasm that he put into everything he did had been drained out. As everyone in the office began contemplating the now bleak immediate future, it pulled everyone back to reality from wallowing in despair with a single sentence. "Everyone except B, get out. This is to be mentioned to no one outside of this office. We'll discuss this further tomorrow," the Reikage declared. Everyone obeyed and did as they were told. B could only wonder what his brother wanted to talk about. I let out an irritated sigh before he spoke. "I wonder if this is what father felt when one of his subordinates went against orders and attempted to kidnap a bloodline bearer or target of interest ahead of schedule. I know it happened a few times due to the reports from his tenure, because this is probably one of the most infuriating things that has happened since I took this damn hat." B had put his sorrow aside for a moment and asked a question that A's rant had given him. "You were planning on kidnapping the Uzumaki boy and some Hyuga kid? How were you planning on getting someone in to do the job?" I responded. "I had a plan to make a grab for the kids in a few years, get Konoha to come to the table for negotiations, get the final agreements taken care of within Konoha itself. That third Hokage would grasp at any chance for a true peace between our villages." B inquired. "I'm guessing that the plan has been made completely unusable." I nodded. Yes, it has been ruined completely. This has destroyed any bit of credibility we could have used to start those negotiations. Though Hiruzen doing this and having the Nibi extracted is a bit of a surprise. I get the feeling he did it so if it ever came to light to the Konoha public that one of our Black Ops team made a near-successful incursion, he could say he did respond and punish us after everything Kumo has done against Konoha. B nodded and then asked, "Where do we go from here?" A looked at his brother and contemplated what to do before responding. "We keep this mostly under wraps, cover up the fact that we lost Nibi. We start improving the quality of our shinobi. Which means me and you will be intensifying our training. We need to be at our absolute best." The Hachibi Jinchuriki nodded. I got up from his chair and stated, "Come on B, let's go home and try to get some sleep before it's time to get started." And so the two brothers left, shaken by the loss of a comrade but determined to stay strong. For the sake Kumo. Mt. Mayaboku Gamamaru, the seer Toad's chamber the day after Pain's announcement, young Gamabunta had come to visit his grandfather again. At least that was what the old Toad remembered. Perhaps he had come for business, and then decided to talk with dear old Granddad. Apparently the old Toad had fallen asleep. His head was all sorts of groggy, but he recognized the blackness that stood before him in his mind's eye. It was the blackness that accompanied his premonitions ever since he had achieved his heightened state of enlightenment, where the universe began to reveal secrets and the future to him, all those years ago. After dear Hagoromo-chan and Hamura-chan had managed to defeat their mother and sealed the chakra of the Jubi, the monstrosity that Kaguya had unleashed in her madness, away within Hagoromo-chan. The problem with his premonitions was that they would start to invade his dreams, and at first he wouldn't be able to recall any detail, but his thoughts following the visions would gravitate towards things that would relate to what he saw and memories that shared relevance to the details within the dream. Perhaps those two and their mother had something to do with what he saw. It was possible. The old Toad was called back to the land of the waking by the cries of his grandson. "Grandfather!" Gamabunta cried. The seer Toad shook to consciousness with great alarm, before calming down after regaining his bearings. "I'm sorry, Bunta-chan, but you are going to have to remind me why you were here," the old Toad said. "Not a problem, grandfather. I figured you were having another premonition," the Toad boss responded before continuing. "I was here to visit, but Kosuke came to inform me of the second half to a clan-wide discussion that me, Ma, and Pa had started a while back to discuss your suggestion of adding multiple new summoners to the Toad clan contract, once those little ones from the prophecy you gave a few months ago to Jiraiya are old enough to begin learning how to summon us, with the rest of the clan," Gamabunta explained. "I see. I remember when we first tried to have the conversation it was chaos before we decided to let everyone cool off. According to Kosuke, how did it go this time?" Gamamaru asked. "Apparently the clan was split down the middle in regards to the issue. Everyone agreed that Minato's son, Naruto, should be added to the contract the moment he is old to begin training on how to summon. But in regards to the other two was where everyone was split. Half were for it, and half were against it. Pa was able to negotiate out a compromise on a middle ground that everyone could at least live with. We will only add 2 new summoners to the contract, Naruto and one other." Gamabunta summarized Kosuke's rather lengthy explanation that had been given while Gamamaru was asleep. "I see. That is preferable to nothing at all being agreed on," the old Toad said. "I agree completely. But the question is which one?" Gamabunta responded. "Given that we at least know that the Hyuga in question is this Hinata-chan and that she is a Jinchuriki, I would say that we better go with her," Gamamaru said to his grandson. "That sounds reasonable, and if she was kidnapped by those who sought to free Jubi, and the enemy had a means of blocking Konoha's primary means of retrieving her, that Kamui marker built into her seal is what Jiraiya said it was. Should a situation occur we could retrieve her using the reverse summoning jutsu," Gamabunta stated as a thought showing his preference for the idea. "That was part of my idea. Go tell the others," the seer Toad said. "As you wish, grandfather, until next time," Gamabunta said before gently hopping away. Gamamaru was now left alone to his thoughts, and one thing was bothering him in his mind. One question that would not leave him alone, but ultimately started reminding him of his dream vision. Why are thoughts about Kaguya's eyes, Hagoromo's eyes, and Hamura's eyes refusing to leave my head? And now thoughts of Indra's descendants and their eternal Mangekyo Sharingan? Then a black void filled the seer Toad's head. The premonition had begun again. Hopefully this time when he woke he would recall some of the details. Within the initial void, 3 sets of eyes opened. One was a cerulean blue set of eyes, one was a pale white set of eyes, and the last was a black set of eyes. Then the blue eyes turned red with a slit. The pale set thinned into a slit before being surrounded by a red circle on one side and a yellow circle on the other. While the black eyes turned red with 3 black tomos, the Sharingan. A boiling red aura surrounded the first 2. Then the eyes changed again. The first 2 briefly became completely white and hollow and surrounded by dark red aura, before they changed again. The tomos within the Sharingan of the third set of eyes began to spin until they merged to form a new symbol, the Mangekyo Sharingan. The eyes that had originally been blue returned to such before they turned orange with rectangular-shaped pupils and gained a red-colored shading around the eye that was so dark it looked orange, a telltale sign of the Sage Mode when used by human that had been taught how to use it in the environment of MT Maiboku. The pale white eyes returned to their original state before they shrunk and became rectangle-shaped pupils surrounded by a lavender circle and a lavender shading around the eyes. Another practitioner of Toad-style Sage Mode apparently. The Mangekyo reverted back to a standard Sharingan, however the tomos straightened out while the eyes and space around them developed strange alterations. It resembled a Sage Mode, but the Seer Toad could not think of which Summon clan would have one that created those changes. But he knew it looked familiar. Then eyes once again began changing. The slits reformed in the first 2 set of eyes, but the eye color for the first set turned orange rather than red, while the red and yellow colors for the second formed the slits this time while the pale coloring remained for the eye color. The Sharingan returned to the Mangekyo form before it began to swirl until a new symbol had appeared and merged with the old symbol, an eternal Mangekyo. The eyes changed one final time. The orange eyes turned yellow and the slit turned into a cross-shaped symbol. The second set of eyes turned into a rotating floral pattern on a blue eye, and the third set of eyes had one of the eyes turned into a purple color with concentric circles, a Rinnegan. But then tomos developed on certain circles, an altered version of the eye of the Jubi, the Rinne Sharingan. What does it mean? Perhaps time and more details of the prophecy becoming visible and retainable would reveal the overall meaning. Kyupo, a town located 2 days away from Amagekyo 2 days after Pain's announcement. Jiraiya the Toad Sage was probably one of the most well-known spy masters in the elemental nations. Few wouldn't recognize him due to his fame as a Sannin. Few wouldn't fall over themselves to meet the author behind the latest phenomenon in the world of adult literature, Ika Ika Paradise, and even fewer wouldn't actually notice his presence unless he truly wished to be noticed. However, to be everywhere and anywhere was a problem that had faced spy masters since the dawn of using such information and espionage tactics to wage war and flush out threats. The solution that the pioneers of the art of espionage came up with was to build their own networks of trusted subordinates and informants who could gather the information, and Jiraiya had certainly done that. Some would form it by planting moles to gather information by various means. Some would find those who felt a lack of loyalty to their country in comparison to much needed money, and some would sell out anything to gain favor with another, stronger nation. Jiraiya had built his network on all the above and made damn sure that they would never rat him out. The second kind was hard to buy off from under you when you could pay for their loyalty both with funds given to pay for information and your own personal surplus of funds that you made from a successful life as a shinobi and from newly built success as an author, after the dud that your first book turned out to be and then the smash hit your second one was. However, Jiraiya had built his network by also using a fourth kind, those who were so loyal to their nation that they would sell information to a trusted friend to see that any threat looming within would be torn out to prevent their total destruction. What these kind of informants do is completely different from what Danzo had done. They did it for no chance of gaining an advantage over other countries. They did it because they understood the fundamental truth to the world that it was impossible to survive on your own, and did what they did in hopes of one day peace could be achieved, without the domination of everyone else. It took guts to take a stand for what believe in when it seems you are all alone. It took more guts to betray your village for a cause you believe in. And it took a hell of a lot of guts to betray your village out of true, genuine loyalty. Danzo just betrayed the village because he thought he and he alone was the village, and what was good for him was good for the village. I hope he is suffering in that jail cell of his, Jiraiya thought bitterly. However, the great spy networks were often led by those who knew how to coordinate with the leaders of others, to make friends and to ensure that those friendships were strong enough to ensure they were never betrayed. Which was why he was sitting down talking to the man in front of him, Kageyami Hisashi. A man who held the loyalty of at least a man within every hidden village, national capital, criminal organization, and population center of interest. Appearance-wise, Hisashi was nothing special, but his most striking features was his hair and eye color. His hair color was so dark it might be mistaken for black, but a close look showed it to be an incredibly dark shade of purple. His eyes were far more unmistakable. They were also colored purple, but unlike his hair, it was unmistakable for any other color. Though that last one was easily concealed by the man's use of goggles and shades, depending on time and conditions. The major elephant in the room about the man was this: he was not from the elemental nations, which led to the second, which was that he possessed no chakra, though he did possess power of his own, deadly pragmatism, and knowledge of ways to damage the human body, as well as an extremely fast reaction rate that made him dangerous to fight. The man projected a near-constant facade of immaturity and bumbling clumsiness, particularly around any downwards flight of stairs, and the facade was further strengthened by the man's love for strong drinks that would make straight-up acid look like clean river water. Jiraiya was still smelling that horrible scent of the booze the enigmatic spymaster carried from the one time he decided to take a sniff of the beverage the man carried around in a traveler's flask of liquid courage. But get him onto a topic that hits home and the immaturity faded away and gave way to a particularly deep and odd mixture of both the idealism of a visionary with the belief that peace could be achieved and the cynicism that gave the distinct impression that he had seen quite a bit of true horror and had known far too much of war. That made his alcoholism make so much sense in hindsight. During these conversations, the amount of depth that would be included gave much to doubt his apparent age. He appeared to be just about 25 to 30 years old and claimed to be far older, with his mentioning of his children being almost full grown. But do or say the wrong things in his presence, and his temper would explode, and the man's humanity would disappear into the ether. The image of what he did to human traffickers and anyone who did anything untoward involving children the one time they had stumbled upon a group whilst traveling together a year ago would haunt Jiraiya's nightmares for the rest of his days. To be given what they were was to be given a fate far worse than death, to be left in incredible suffering for the rest of your days, with no means of ending it yourself, and any ability to beg others for death completely removed. Moving on from the occasional nightmare that was haunting Jiraiya ever since he witnessed it. The man told some pretty wild and entertaining stories, to the point that Jiraiya asked him if he could compile them into an anthology. Hisashi agreed under the caveat that Jiraiya only write what he remembered and then the man would go over it to check for accuracy. Relatively tame, considering that the Toad Sage was expecting him to demand royalties. The man could find Jiraiya wherever he went, refusing to say how, but was more than happy to share his information with the Toad Sannin. Wherever he came from, he often had to return to at a moment's notice, but he would always return from soon after. But right now they were waiting for Hisashi's man from Amigekyo to show up. He was due to give a report to Kosuka 2 days ago, but the Toad had managed to catch him as he was leaving the patrol perimeter surrounding the fortress hidden village. Kosuka and the other Toads was not the usual method for gathering the reports from Hisashi's network, but strange whispers from within the land of rain tell of something big getting ready to happen, and had changed things. But when Kosuka reported his observations of the man's behavior during their brief meeting and the information that the Toad had been given told both spymasters that something had happened and it had caused Fugo, the man working for Hisashi's network in Amigekyo, and the sole contact either one had there, to leave the town in a hurry and head to the rendezvous point located here. Hanzo had made it tough to recruit spies from his ranks, but Hisashi had managed to smooth talk a mid-rank member of AIM's command who had misgivings about Hanzo's leadership to start snitching. But he was dragged from his thoughts back to reality by the story that he was only half paying attention to being told by the Enigma, something about one of the fights he had previously been in. He had me on the fucking ground, dead to any form of fucking rights. I did not have a damn means of actually killing him unless he used one specific thing in his arsenal that if destroyed would kill him from the fucking shock. And guess what he fucking did? The man asked. He spoke in a way that reminded Jiraiya that he had spoken to sailors with cleaner mouths than him whenever he was projecting his facade. At least while he wasn't too angry. If his temper was pushed hard enough he would say the curses with such gravitas that would usually only be reserved for the heroes of old stories amidst issuing a speech to challenge impossible odds or challenging the villains and eviscerating their entire motivation and goal. I'm going to take a guess and say that he threw that one thing at you? I'm basing that on the fact that you are sitting here and that you do not appear to be undead in any way. Jiraiya responded. Hisashi let loose his wide grin and chuckled before he responded. Yep. That was exactly what happened. The dumb fucking bastard threw it at me and I countered by destroying it, and the sympathetic damage from its destruction killed him. Fucking dumbass. the man said, and Jiraiya found himself extremely thankful that Hisashi hadn't busted out laughing. When he did a full-belly laughter, he would let off a cacophonic sound that would give anyone chills and cover their ears to protect them from the hyenic sound. I'm guessing that encounters with similar guys went a lot better because you learned from the encounter? Jiraiya questioned. Oh hell yes they did. I learned the general tactics that they used and developed countermeasures to use against the bastards and added a weapon and a technique or two to my bag of tricks that would actually kill those dumb fuckers the next time I saw one of them. The man said, finishing his drink, before his eyes went wide and Jiraiya saw the visual indicator of the man swapping from his childish facade to his business mode. Look towards the entrance to the tavern in such a way that doesn't look suspicious. The man coming in wearing the AIM uniform with a black armband on his right forearm. Do you see him? The enigmatic spymaster asked. Jiraiya looked as he was asked to and saw the man. He possessed a build and a face that were unremarkable for any ninja. The perfect spy, beneath notice. Yeah, I see him. Is that Fugo? Jiraiya asked after seeing the man Hisashi directed his attention to. No, it's not him. It's a solid-state fog clone of him that was due to be sent here to inform us that he has arrived and is waiting for us somewhere. He's following the procedure that I set for this kind of situation to the letter. Hisashi responded. How can you tell it's a fog clone? Jiraiya asked, trying to figure out the enigma with him. Most clones don't possess a certain mental capacity needed to be recognized by my primary means of detection, and I can see a slight fog coming off of him from the clone's structural decay due to being outside a climate or weather condition that would help to preserve its structural integrity. Not being able to detect clones by this method of mine is not very bad in combat, since I hardly ever rely on a sensory method to fight, but it is worth noting. But enough of that for now. Get up slowly in way to suggest that we were already in the middle of leaving. Then head close enough to hear him make an order. He'll tell the barkeep a number or mention something during his order, and that will be an indicator of where we need to go. The man responded, which left Jiraiya wondering what most clones lacked mentally that made them easy for him to spot with whatever sensory means he used. They got close enough to hear the conversation between the clone and the barkeep. The barkeep was speaking at the moment. So stranger, where you headed? The clone responded. Just staying in town a day or two before moving on. Jiraiya's thoughts moved with hearing the clone speak. Either this Fugo is highly skilled with fog clones to the point of replicating the traits of other solid-state clones, even up to shadow clones, or he made an advancement of AIM's fog clone that replicates a similar effect. Looking at him from this close, I can just barely see the fog Hisashi mentioned coming from the clone's structural decay. But even though it's this advanced, what does it lack that Hisashi cannot sense? And how was he able to see the fog if I wasn't able to until we got this close? The barkeep shrugged at the answer before asking a new question. So what can I get you to drink? The clone responded. I passed a sake distillery on the way in, right next to the inn I decided to get a room at. Got any good sake from it? The barkeep thought for a moment before pulling out a bottle of sake. You're talking about the Kyupo sake. It's a popular brand around this area but nowhere else cares for it. It was at that moment that Hisashi cut in. Hey, I'm here to pay for me and my friend's tab. But I'm feeling awfully generous today and this stranger has got some good taste. The Kyupo sake brand is deeply underappreciated. To meet someone who appreciates its value like me is a welcomed experience, one I will gladly pay for. Will this be enough? Hisashi smoothly said to the barman while handing a handful of Ryo. To which the barman nodded. Hisashi grabbed the bottle and turned to the clone and said, Come on, let's go back to the inn. My friend and I have reservations there as well. To which the clone nodded. As they left the tavern and got onto the streets, the clone dispelled itself into the fog it was made of once there was no one else around but the Toad Sage and the enigmatic spymaster. Hisashi took the lead and guided Jiraiya to the inn the clone had referred to. While they were walking, Jiraiya decided to test his luck on getting an answer. Hey Hisashi, how on earth did you see the fog coming off the clone even if you were that far away? The man laughed before answering. I cheated. I have a method of seeing and listening far closer than I may be positioned physically. Jiraiya was outwardly calm but was perplexed on the inside. The hell is talking about? Is he being serious or trying to mislead me? Or is he telling the truth and it is too outrageous that it sounds like a lie? By the time Jiraiya was done with that thought, they were walking into the inn room, where a man who was identical to the clone sat within, with hands shaking like mad. Good, you're both here. I was worried that the two of you were late. The man, most likely Fugo, said upon opening his eyes. Hisashi walked towards the man and handed him the bottle of sake. Got your message from the clone. Here is your sake. Now do you actually like this brand or did you only order it to direct us to this inn? Fugo nodded. It had always been a favorite, so I used it to direct you here and get me the drink that I desperately needed after what happened in AIM. Hisashi nodded while Jiraiya asked the question. What happened in AIM that has got you so spooked? I don't even know you, but I can tell you're scared of something. Fugo nodded before responding. I figured the drink will wait till after I have finished my report and answering any questions you may have if I can. To start, Hanzo is no longer in control of Amigakure. Jiraiya's eyes went wide. Hanzo lost control. How? The people have always feared his power too much to actually rally behind deposing him. Fugo nodded. Yes, but I'm afraid that is not what happened. Hanzo lost control of Amigakure because he was killed in combat. He very much cannot rule it from the grave. Jiraiya was at a loss for words before he found what to say. How? Who killed him? Fugo answered. Apparently he was challenged to open combat, and it was by his successor who is called Pain, who was assisted by his right hand, a woman named Konan. Hisashi nodded while Jiraiya was at a loss for words. Could it be that the woman at Pain's side was the same Konan he had trained along with Nagato and Yahiko? If so, then, Konan was alive. But why was she allied with this Pain? He had heard that Konan, Yahiko, and Nagato had all confronted Hanzo, but things went sour and Yahiko and Nagato had disappeared along with Konan, presumed to be dead, and the militia they had gathered was scattered. Any who had remained had been unified under its fourth in command, a man who was named Shiger. If Konan was truly still alive, then maybe Nagato and Yahiko were as well. Hisashi spoke. Anything distinctive about either of them? Fugo nodded. Konan possesses what appears to be an origami-constructed rose in her hair, has blue hair, and amber-colored eyes. The one time I heard her speaking before I left, she spoke with little emotion in her voice, and was kept at a near monotone. She sounded like someone who was so tired that all enthusiasm she could have had was gone. Pain possesses short yet spiky orange hair and his face is covered in piercings. Presumably they serve some sort of purpose, because I have never seen a person with piercings that looked anything like what he had, with as many of them, or in some of the places they were in, nor have I seen anything made from a material like what his piercings were. I assume he had more piercings hidden underneath his clothes. His skin is pale, but in a way that kind of reminds me of either a decaying corpse or one that was preserved. Both wore a long black cloak, with a red cloud pattern on it. Finishing his explanation, but with that his hands began shaking even worse. Jiraiya nodded, but then he moved to the question that should be answered by Hanzo's death, but something told him that it wasn't, especially with Fugo's non-stop, and now intensified shaking in his hands. These two sound like nightmares if they were able to kill Hanzo, but for some reason I'm guessing that isn't what has you so spooked that your hands won't stop shaking, so what is it? Hisashi looked before he nodded. Yeah, he's right, Fugo. I noticed the constant shaking you were having when I walked in, but now that I really think about it, it never really stopped. So answered Jiraiya's question. Fugo nodded before saying a sentence that would shake Jiraiya to his core. Pain's eyes were a dojutsu with a design that anyone who knows old legends about the origins of chakra know, purple with concentric ripples. There is no mistaking it, Pain had the Rinnegan. Jiraiya felt his heart sink with that. Everything after that was a dull haze, but he remembered every word said during it, including the parts about Pain stopping the raining over Amigakure and parting the clouds over the heavily fortified village to show the sun rising at dawn, as well as his intention to build an organization called Akatsuki to bring peace to the world by force by gathering the 9 Jinchuriki. At one point Hisashi began writing on something, but he had finished by the time Fugo had ended his report. Hisashi and Jiraiya both bid Fugo farewell before leaving the room. As he and Hisashi left the room, Hisashi pulled the Toad Sage aside. Hisashi spoke. Look, Jiraiya, I'm not going to lie. I know about those orphans from AIM that you trained, Yahiko, Konan, and Nagato. I also know about Nagato's dojutsu, which is, or was, the Rinnegan. I know your thought right now would be to break into Amigakure and find out from Pain and his right hand about who they are and where they got Pain's Rinnegan. Jiraiya looked at the man and wondered how on earth he knew about that, but realized he wasn't done talking and decided to wait before speaking. But I have been aware of Pain's existence for about 2 years as a whisper in AIM's underworld. He has earned quite a reputation for destroying anyone who refused to get out his way, often in some pretty brutal ways. I didn't say anything before now because I couldn't definitively prove he truly existed or that if it was a group pretending to be a single person. But this proves that there is some merit to what I have heard. If you go running and looking for answers, he will kill you. Your mind and judgment will be clouded by all the emotions associated with those kids. Jiraiya sighed, knowing the man was right. So what are we going to do? Hisashi put a hand to his chin. I have to report this to my superiors, along with anything else I can link as possible signs or definitively prove as part of the building of this Akatsuki that Pain claimed he was creating. If I can convince them that it is enough of a threat, I might be able to step in with some aid beyond what I'm already allowed to do, which is actually part of the basis for our partnership. I suggest you go to Konoha and report Hanzo's death, as well as Pain's rise to power and overall aspirations. I suggest you leave out the part about Pain possessing the Rinnegan, to everyone except Hiruzen, and make sure to advise him to keep it quiet, at least for now, while he is mostly harmless and keeping to himself while he is building his organization and strengthening his regime. I could imagine someone ordering Pain's assassination to avoid war due to word got out about him holding the Rinnegan, and somehow either botch it and cause Pain retaliating, or they succeed and make a martyr out of him. But they got sloppy and left evidence to implicate them, or planted evidence to frame someone else, and then you would have another war. The man concluded. Jiraiya nodded, understanding the need for secrecy. If this got out to the wrong people, then another great ninja war would be started too soon after the third great ninja war had been ended. Jiraiya spoke. I'm guessing this is goodbye. Hisashi nodded. It is indeed. At least for now, my friend. I'll be back in at least a few months, so farewell for now. And take this and give it to the Hokage, when you tell him what you've learned concerning aim. The enigma concluded by handing the Toad Sage a letter bearing the kanjis for shadow, darkness, and past on the seal. The kanjis that the man used for his name whenever he wrote it using that lettering, which Jiraiya had become familiar with ever since their partnership had begun 2 years ago. The Toad Sage pocketed the letter, before sharing a few more words with the enigma. Soon time came for them to part ways. A brief handshake and the two men went their separate ways, Jiraiya towards the land of fire and Konoha, and Hisashi towards parts unknown to his homeland. But one thought crowded the Toad Sage's mind. Conan, are you really the woman at Pain's side? And Pain, are you Yahiko or Nagato? If you are, what happened to the other? Just what happened to make you go down this path? And if you are not either one of them, how did you get that Rinnegan? I will get those answers. One day. Jiraiya looked ahead and saw a massive length of road ahead of him, both actually and metaphorically. Just how long would it take to reach what lies at the end? Konoha 3 days after Pain's announcement. To Obito, the last few days had a strange start to them. To start things off, Kakashi and Rinchan both complimented a meal that he made. That was something he had never gotten before. Then Rin started throwing herself into a new type of training for bettering her ability to wield the Sanbai's chakra. Then Kakashi left for yet another high-ranked mission, said he couldn't talk about it, and needed to leave as soon as possible. But he did say that if he was able to successfully accomplish the mission objective, it would be one of the best things they could get for themselves financially. Stupid restrictions on them being able to tap Sensei's funds after he died. It wasn't like IWA was going to find out about Naruto and his connection to Sensei just from tracing the resources back to them. Obito didn't dare say it aloud for fear of tempting fate. Not after what had happened the two last time he tempted fate, almost 3 years ago and then just 5 months ago. He didn't want to see what the third time would bring. Which led him to where he was now, the Uchiha clan compound. The why to that was rather simple. Mikoto had something to do and usually she would leave Itachi with Sasuke, but some of Itachi's recent behavior had herself a little concerned. Though considering just what he had heard about Itachi from a year ago, left him with little reason to doubt Mikoto's concerns. So she asked Obito to watch both of her sons for an afternoon. Obito accepted as he had nothing better to do. He had heard that Itachi was supposed to be the greatest prodigy that the Uchiha had ever produced, the kind that had not been seen since the days of Madara and Izuna, which Obito could definitely tell there was some merit to just by observing the kid. He could absorb information and figure out an application easily enough. Though Itachi's care for his younger brother was phenomenal. A lot of the care that Obito observed was done with skill that he had only seen from few. It seemed that Itachi was determined to be the best big brother to Sasuke as he could. The kid was a bit on the side of taciturn with conversations, though considering that Obito was a virtual stranger to him, but one that his mother trusted, the attitude seemed completely understandable. Though every time Obito tried to get the kid to open up, he was just brushed off. But Obito could tell it was more of a lack of interest in the subjects he was trying to approach Itachi with rather than genuine desire to not talk. and he was being polite in his dissuasions. The kid at one point got out a fairly well-kept book and started reading. But then the kid finally spoke without prompting. "How come I have never met you even though you're an Uchiha?" Obito thought about how much to tell the kid before he finally decided to answer the kid. "Well, you see, a few years ago something happened on a mission, and what happened left my tolerance for unfair crap far lower than my usual. I decided to cut out a bunch of stuff that I decided weren't worth the effort, like the clan that most of the members of which, with a few exceptions, treated me like garbage for not being able to get my Sharingan until I was almost 13 years old. To make matters worse, that was also at about the time some very loud voices within our clan were going off about views that went directly against what I believed in. Your mother told me about that elder, Izaoi, who was executed the other day. He was one of the loudest voices at the time for the Uchiha trying to arise to their rightful position at the top. I knew that what that meant, a bloody coup that would subjugate anyone who did not bear the clan name Uchiha, and I had a feeling it would be a matter of time before a main house/branch house system like the one the Hyuga have would be established to further establish some further superiority," Obito said. Itachi thought for a moment before nodding in understanding, before questioning one thing about Obito's explanation. "But I always heard that the system the Hyuga clan have is to protect the Byakugan. Have you ever heard otherwise?" Itachi asked. Obito grimaced slightly before answering the question. "Kid, I have heard that explanation for the main house and branch house system along with the caged bird curse seal for years. If it was truly meant to protect the Byakugan, then there wouldn't be a need for a divide between the two that is so steep they might as well be two separate clans. There wouldn't be a need to place restrictions on certain advanced gentle fist techniques to forbid them from being taught to branch house members, such as the 64 palms and the Hyuga's so-called secret move, the Kaiten." Itachi understood what he was being told before he asked another question. "I have never heard of the caged bird seal referred to as a curse seal before." Obito smiled, seeing that his hint was being noticed. "That's because most people in Konoha are so used to it that they have either forgotten or chosen to ignore that the caged bird is a textbook example of a cursed seal, designed to interfere with natural processes of the human body in pretty unnatural ways that are highly damaging to the body whenever it is activated. With a built-in function to inflict pain key to respond only to a certain signature and activated by a hand seal. The seal is never meant to be removed or broken down naturally, and that pain-inflicting function can also be used to kill whoever the curse seal is applied to. Any self-righteous notion that their caged bird curse seal is meant solely to protect the Byakugan gets thrown straight out the window when they use the same curse seal technique, a Junjutsu, to also keep their family from rising up against them. If it was truly meant to do what is claimed, the pain and death-inflicting function wouldn't be part of the seal's matrix, and the seal would be applied to every last member of the clan. The Hyuga's caged bird fits every last criteria used to classify it as a cursed seal. There is some slight overlap between the standard seal classification and the curse seal classification, but it more than fills the required amount of boxes to be counted as one. Though I do believe that most Hyugas truly believe that what the elders of their clan preach about their curse seal. I also do happen to know there has been a push by a faction within the clan to have the curse seal revised. And tying into the statement that started this, I choose to always refer to it as the caged bird curse seal to keep myself from forgetting like others have," Obito said, finishing his lecture. Itachi nodded and responded, "I think I understand what you are saying. If it was truly made for the reason they claim, it wouldn't be so draconian in its structuring." Obito nodded. "Yep, more or less exactly what I'm saying." Then it went quiet briefly. Obito looked over, seeking to keep the boy's interest in the conversation going. "Say, what is that book you're reading?" Itachi's face grew a small smile before he began speaking. "It's called The Tale of Two Brothers. It's about two brothers who are the sons of a powerful woman who is worshipped as a goddess of peace. But she rules with an iron fist. She uses her power to bring peace at the cost of the freedom to choose, creating an artificial peace. The woman has people routinely sacrificed to fuel her army and power, and ends up sacrificing a girl who is dear to her eldest son. The two brothers are approached by a small creature who has achieved enlightenment, who shows them what kind of army their mother was building and how. The creature ends up taking the two brothers under his guidance, and teaches them how to use the power they inherited from their mother, as the creature possessed a similar power through his kind's connection to nature. The two brothers end up fighting their mother, who accidentally transforms herself into a mindless monster, trying to draw enough power to stop them until she was finished bringing about her plan. The end result is that they have to steal its soul from its body, and then seal away the body. They end up splitting the creature's soul into multiple other creatures with minds of their own, and that is where the story ends. Obito was caught up on some of the details Itachi had spat out, but eventually he spoke. That is kinda interesting sounding to me, but I can't shake the feeling I have heard it somewhere before. Itachi simply responded. From what I heard, it is based off some old folktale that was passed down in the land of ancestors. Maybe you heard another telling of it. Obito nodded. That may just be it. Is this your first time reading it or have you read it before? Obito responded while thinking. He might not be wrong about it being based off on an old folktale, but for some reason I keep thinking about the tale about the twin sages that the turtle had told Rin before she removed the lock on him, and the details we got from Jiraiya that he got from the seer toad. Maybe the story is the same thing just with a few differences due to adaptation or something. Itachi shook his head. No, it is not my first time reading this story, it is my third time. I found it to be really interesting. That conversation continued on for some time before it came to an end. Obito decided to let Itachi read in peace while he let his mind run wild. Obito's thoughts eventually settled on a headache from before Minato-sensei's death, completing the Rasengan by adding elemental affinity. It was almost impossible to keep stable once the elemental infusion had begun, mainly due to the massive split in concentration between holding the Rasengan and trying to mold the elemental chakra as well as merging it into the Rasengan. The longest that either Kakashi, Rin-chan, or Obito himself had managed to hold the stability before it busted was about half of a minute. Frustration at the failures to figure out how to complete their sensei's technique was high at the moment for all three students of the late 4th Hokage. Though some failures had been the source of comic relief, especially the feedback from one of Kakashi's failures blowing him back into a tree and knocking the young jonin completely unconscious. Before long Obito heard the door open and a voice say, "Obito, I'm back." Obito left the ponderings behind and got up to greet his aunt, only to see Rin standing with her. Obito smiled. "Hey Mikoto." "Hey Rin-chan." Mikoto looked at him and spoke. "I hope Sasuke wasn't too much of a headache." "He wasn't much of a problem. What I could take care of was easy enough, and the small stuff that I didn't know, Itachi was able to walk me through." "Hey Rin-chan, why are you here?" Obito responded. Rin responded. "I had to step out of the house for an errand and left the hounds with Naruto. While I was out I ran into Mikoto and she asked me to come back with her as she was coming to relieve you of duty." Mikoto nodded and chuckled. "Yes, I figured you would be ready to go home and rest after dealing with Sasuke." Obito nodded before grabbing his shoes and moving to leave the house. "Well, I won't say it was the best experience. It was a lot better than a mission going wrong. If you need someone to look after them and I'm on time off, I'll do it again." Itachi was interesting to talk to when I managed to get him talking. Mikoto nodded. "I figured you might say something like that. I'll keep it in mind." And so the young couple left for home, unaware of the trouble that had begun brewing elsewhere in the elemental nations. The land of rice paddies 4 days after Pain's announcement to reach perfection, to learn every jutsu, and to achieve true immortality and unending life. Is there a more noble pursuit to make one's life goal? That was Orochimaru's dream. His ambition was to make a life, most importantly his, immortal like that of a god. At one time it was to grant it to Konoha, the village he once loved, until he began to lose faith in the village itself. Then it turned to granting it to both his teammates as well as himself. They were at one point like siblings to him. They were the only family he had ever since the untimely death of his parents. They had their squabbles. Ultimately they were able to overcome their differences to be one of the strongest shinobi teams to ever be produced by the hidden villages. However, time is a vindictive monster that tears apart everything given a long enough time scale. And it had plenty of time to wear down the bonds of the legendary Sannin of Konohagakure. However, he hadn't truly turned his back on Konoha till it rejected him for his experiments, seeking to revive a lost bloodline in hopes of ensuring that the Senju's greatest legacy wouldn't die out with Tsunade-chan while she wallowed in her despair. However, most of the test subjects were rejected by the implanted DNA from Hashirama. The only one he heard that had survived and gained would release was an infant named Tenzo. No clan name, however, he was descended from an illegitimate Senju child. It seemed the clan's genetic traits gave Tenzo the necessary potential for the DNA implantation to properly integrate into the boy's body, even if it failed to endow him with the full extent of the first Hokage's power. However, when the experiment was discovered, instead of being acknowledged for the service he had done for the village by saving one of its bloodlines from extinction, Orochimaru was branded as a criminal and forced to leave behind a lot of his research and experiments. Life was full of ups and downs, but those who truly flourished were those who could weather it all and pull everything back together perfectly even after being completely ruined. Most recently, Orochimaru had run into a young boy who was far from home, Kabuto, one of Danzo's roots. The boy took to any kind of new information, soaking it up like a sponge in water. A bright mind that was being used for merely a deep black ops infiltration agent. What a waste of potential. At the moment, the group that Orochimaru had recently assembled under his leadership was currently poising to establish a hidden village within the land of rice paddies. The rogue Sannin was currently trying to decide between killing the daimyo and having the power of his office transferred to the hidden village leader, which would make it easier to move around quietly and cut the risk for an information leak, or trying to establish a legitimate relation with the daimyo and sparing the headache of illegitimacy to his rule that could be used as an excuse for villages like Konoha to invade. However, the more pressing concern was the large chakra that had just entered Orochimaru's sensing periphery. This chakra felt old and chimeric, like it had bits of the chakra of others merged into it. It took a mere moment for Orochimaru to realize that the signature was familiar, and a mere half a second to realize who his pursuer was. However, that was more than enough time for the pursuer to attack. Fire release, searing migraine! A massive and explosive fireball came hurtling towards Orochimaru, who smoothly dodged it. The snake grinned at his hunter, noticing the familiar red and green-colored eyes. Well, Kakuzu, any sensor who has lived to tell the tale of your battles has always mentioned what your chakra has felt like, not to mention our encounter back during the Third Great Ninja War. Tell me, how are the broken ribs I gave you and that shoulder that I damaged doing? The snake asked, out of a desire to buy time for an escape plan to be made. Kakuzu merely chuckled behind the mask that covered most of his face and his long and messy hair that almost looked like a tattered hood. Orochimaru of the Sannin. You've been one of the hits I've been looking to collect on ever since you left Konoha. And with a single hand seal, Kakuzu's skin turned metallic looking and he began rushing towards the rogue snake Sannin. Orochimaru rushed through hand seals and thrust his arms out before crying his jutsu. Hidden shadow snake hands. And snakes began rushing out of his sleeves toward the chimeric ninja. However, before their attacks could meet, the encounter was disrupted by the entrance of another presence. Well, this makes our job easier without having to track the two of you down separately. A high, soft voice said. The two missing nin ceased their encounter and looked at the source and saw a strange ninja standing there. Half of its body was white with a light yellow human-like eye on one side, and on the other half of its body was black and had a beady yellow eye that was unlike a human. Both sides had green grass-like hair and the neck and head was contained behind a Venus flytrap-like taper. And thank you for stopping your fight on your own rather than forcing us to intervene. The creature said in the same voice that caught their attention, but only the lips of its white side moved. Who are you and what do you want? Kakuzu demanded. Orochimaru wondered what could have caused the creation of the creature that stood before him, but he had to agree with Kakuzu. I find myself agreeing with his rather blunt demand. I politely asked the same as Kakuzu did. The white half formed a smile while the black half remained frowning. Of course, we shall answer. I am White Zetsu. And then the black half moved, its lips moved and a similar voice came out, but it was much deeper and had a rougher tone. And I am Black Zetsu. We come on behalf of the leader of Amigakure, who is searching for powerful ninjas such as yourself for a mission that may last years, but if you survive and succeed, you shall be rewarded greatly. Orochimaru was perplexed why Hanzo would need to recruit others. Why would the mighty Hanzo the Salamander require the service of others outside of his village? Kakuzu nodded in his own confirmation of similar thoughts. Both halves of the Zetsu creature smiled before they both responded in sequence. We don't serve Hanzo. Hanzo is no longer leader of Amigakure nor among the living. Hanzo was killed in combat a week ago. We serve his killer and Hanzo's successor, Pain-sama, who invites you to join the organization he is building to carry out this mission. You are free to refuse, but it will have consequences. Namely that Pain-sama himself shall come and force you to join with much less leniency in negotiating your reward for accomplishing the mission. We are on a timetable and must report back to him. What will your answer be? Orochimaru was horrified at what he had just heard. Someone had managed to defeat Hanzo. This was not someone whose ire was to be earned. But the snake's mind saw opportunity. With a powerful ally like that, perhaps it would help to keep undesirable attention away from his operation for the time being. Perhaps Pain would be willing to assist with an invasion of Konoha during that partnership. Kakuzu answered first. I will join this, only because it intrigues me for the moment. As will I. When should we meet with this Pain? Orochimaru asked. Zetsu smiled then threw two ring at the missing nin. Excellent. Worry not about when it shall begin, just wear the ring at all times, soon it shall be clear on why. The creature then melted into the ground and any trace of a chakra signature was gone in seconds. Both missing Nin were left wondering what madness they had gotten into and what the next years would hold. However, Zetsu did not go straight to his supposed master, instead he re-emerged from the ground in a faraway place. Well, that went better than expected. The white half muttered. Indeed it did. The black responded. I told you that the snake would be in the land of rice paddies and that the bounty hunter would be after him, especially after I set up the newer bounty to entice his greed. Did you not believe me that I was telling the truth? A new presence asked. The creature turned and saw the masked man who was there with them, but was unsurprised by his presence. The white half responded. Yes, there was some doubt in our minds, but you have put it to rest, Nanushir. The masked one bowed. Thank you for using that name this time instead of my real name. We never know who may be listening where. The black half responded. You have proven yourself trustworthy, and you have proven your use over the last few years. We are inclined to start listening to the requests you gave us, such as using your alias Nanushir to refer to you. The rest will come in due time. Especially now that we have Toby back in line after his fight with Namikaze caused severe brain damage and led him to believe that he truly was Madara. The white half continued. We were able to implant a special cell into his damaged brain that will allow us to manipulate his thoughts. It eliminates the possibility of Toby breaking orders and causing a hitch in our plans. Nanushir nodded before he responded. Where do we go from here? To which the black half responded. We shall present both the candidates we have scouted for Akatsuki and the potential recruits we have yet to approach with membership. We shall be giving your name as one of them. One of your requests will be fulfilled with our planned attack in 8 years. Your final request will be attempted to be fulfilled around that time. Nanushir responded. I see. Thank you for your cooperation. I look forward to our future partnership. And the masked Nanushir left with light shining down on his mask to reveal what lied in the shadows of his mask's eye holes, pale, white eyes. The all-seeing Byakugan. A new enemy had emerged, one that Konoha had no knowledge on in the slightest. Konoha 10 days following the events in Kyupo. Sarutobi Hiruzen sat smoking his pipe in contemplation of what Jiraiya had informed him of. Hanzo was dead and control of AIM had been taken by his killers who had issued a gag order on the whole thing. But the most startling part was the fact that one of the killers was the bearer of the mythical Rinnegan. With power like that, it made Hanzo's defeat and death make sense. A sense of dread enveloped the old Hokage at what this could mean, especially with their sights set on the Biju. Sarutobi eventually addressed his student. Jiraiya, is there anything else I should know? Jiraiya nodded. 2 years ago, I was approached by an old acquaintance of yours, a man named Kageyami Hisashi, who offered to help expand my network's reach with his own network in exchange for being able to tap my own. I agreed. Hiruzen was shocked. Hisashi was still alive. The man hadn't been seen since the Third Great Ninja War, when he provided intel that proved critical in the battle that would later become Minato's infamous 1,000-man massacre. Hiruzen had always expected something was strange about him besides his lack of chakra, but this would be thoughts for later. Hiruzen returned to the conversation. I'm assuming this was how you found out about AIM. Jiraiya nodded. Yeah. The man has a talent for befriending and preserving healthy relationships with people who can get him the most information and the most critical bits. Hiruzen spoke. Something I know all too well. Jiraiya spoke. He sent a letter that meant for you. The sage said, holding out the scroll with Hisashi's kanjis for shadow, darkness, and past on the seal. Hiruzen opened it and began reading. Yo Hiruzen, how have things been going since we last met face to face? Hee. Don't answer that. I heard about Bawako. You have my condolences. I know the pain of losing family and close loved ones all too well. So I'm assuming Jiraiya told you about pain like I will be asking him to, and he probably mixed in my personal view on how things could go down if the info leaked to more volatile recipients. Word of advice, don't let it happen. Now about my absence, which I'm sure that you will be asking about. I had to leave the elemental nations due to multiple threats emerging from where I'm from that I'm uniquely suited to deal with in some cases, and in others make a good meat shield, and dumbass they send down a booby-trapped hallway to trigger all the traps. That and relativity is a bitch. I have been keeping an eye on you all through my network, which I still checked on. However, then I began to hear the rumors of the boogeyman of AIM's underworld, Pain. Time eventually proved that I couldn't sit this one out. I began making new moves to fix up my network and began to plot out schemes to indirectly help and counter Pain. However, two certain members of the Hyuga clan began reporting strange behavior from Hitomi and frequent visits from both Team Minato and Jiraiya. Then I noticed the lack of sighting of Ni Yujito. Did some math and checked the work by both adding and subtracting, and had to run quite a bit of higher math to ensure it was right. I used those connections to take an issue that had just emerged within the Hyuga, and have them not deal with it until the night of December 22nd, requiring Hayashi to be pulled away from the delivery room, to allow Minato's students to take Hayashi's daughter to a sealing chamber, and perform the sealing of the monster cat. Anyways, just thought to confess it. Well, I have to run, so I will see you around. Hisashi. Hiruzen sighed. It definitively is the same material used for messages, and the handwriting looked about the same. Jiraiya spoke. What now? Hiruzen spoke as calmly as possible. We gather our strength quietly and prepare for the worst. Jiraiya nodded and left Hiruzen, who kept on toiling through the paperwork, equally unaware of the threat that had begun to plan to strike their village.